Steve Irwin catches you. What does he tell the audience about you and your habitat? Oi, look at this fella. He's of the hairless variety. Rare and silky smooth to the touch. He actually likes when you rub his head. Oh, look at his leg going. Wow, get a load of this Sheila. I can imagine this one spending all of her free time sleeping in her little hidey hole, only coming out 5 times a week to spend hours at a place where she probably regrets being in the first place. And she'll do this weeks of her life all the way up until she dies. This one's pretty big for a female too. Bigger than most average males, actually. Don't think that gives her any luck during the mating season. You know what? I don't care. He calls me a beaut, and I really needed to hear that. Thanks, Steve Irwin. Oi, now looky here. Notice how he seems almost entirely apathetic to my attack. That's because he spends almost every waking moment pretending not to be bothered by the current situation he's in, despite the fact that he's incredibly irritated. To him, this is just another Monday morning staff meeting. He's a truly gorgeous example of mental endurance. Oh, isn't he a beauty? You're alright, fella. You're alright. This guy's looking for a Sheila, but he hasn't having much luck. He's coming in late to the party. Well, this little fella might look upset, but he actually craves physical contact. I was going to say, knowing Steve, he'd say a lot of nice things, and I'd just start crying. This little bugger stimulates reproduction up to 5 times a day, almost exclusively without a mate. Then I imagine he'd shove a Dorito in my mouth and chuck me back into my bedroom. Alright, gotta be real careful here, mates. We've got to show dominance. If we show any affection towards this creature, he'll get attached to us and never leave us alone. Truly one of the most terrifying beasts in North America. Oh boy, there are some pretty harsh, self-depreciating evaluations going on here. Keep on keeping on, you beautiful, lonely beast. And also, folks, I'm sorry for my inconsistent Aussie accent. I'm doing my best. Crikey! This little ranger is quite the sneaky little one. This particular type of animal can hide in a dark room all day and never even see the sunshine. She'll do as much as she can to avoid others of her kind. For those who don't know, ranger is Australian and New Zealand slang for a redhead. Man, are all gingers the same? Because, same, it's the soul that makes the sun feel good. Oi, this here is a common member of his species, and as you can see, he's got a fairly advanced case of fur loss, especially concentrated here at the top of his head. Many males you find in the wild with this condition will try to compensate by growing the fur around their faces, and this fella's no different. This one looks like he spends his days being poked and nipped at by his wee ones. Note the characteristic paunchy belly and the general lack of muscle tone. This fella can spend up to 12 hours a day grazing and trying to find a nice spot to curl up for some shut-eye. Just wait till you start experiencing the second part. I write curled up on the floor next to my 2-year-old's bed at 3 a.m. in the morning. She's ill and requires constant soothing. So no, we don't know if it's corona. My wife's in our bedroom with a squealing 3-year-old. I fell asleep during a lecture today, and not one I sat as a student. A lecture I was giving. Oof. Now, I know what you're thinking. This here fella looks like an absolute killer. He's big, he's covered in hair, and if he wanted to, he could probably knock my block off with one swing. Truth is, his kind look far more scary than they really are. Despite their size, they're actually pretty timid and will only attack when threatened and backed into a corner. Truth is, he just wants to find a Sheila he can settle down with, and who knows, have a couple of kids. Sadly, this fella hasn't had much luck lately. He's the last of his line, and it would be a crying shame if he never got a family of his own. Puts PlayStation 2 controller in my hands. Luckily, here at Australia Zoo, we've got a state-of-the-art gaming room where this fella can play the video games of his youth and relive his life as a juvenile back when life seemed so full of possibilities. I hope this made you laugh, and I'm sorry if it makes you sad. If it did, please be kind to yourself. Life has a way of untangling itself. Steve would want you to care for yourself just as much as he'd want you to care for nature. Oh, this one right here. He can put up a fight if you put a bowl of Cheetos within the area. Good thing is that this bloke is actually calm because he ate a full bowl of Cheetos. I find the easiest to subdue one of these little fellas by withholding a real treat, Mountain Dew, till he settles down and plays nice. This unusually large example of his species is known to consume enormous quantities of cheese in one sitting. He's a very stealthy creature, with the ability to sit in one spot at a computer for up to 8 hours at a time. And that's in his later years. When this fellow was younger, before the introduction of a mate and offspring into the nest, we'd be closer to 16. Picture Steve, laying low in the ground, whispering to camera, "This guy Jimmy here is an endangered fella, meaning there aren't many of him left, and he's most likely not going to find a mate. Now, if you watch here, he's trying to attract a Sheila." 5 minutes of silence as Jimmy stares at his screen before typing, "Sup to the OnlyFans girl he's subbed to." followed by more dead silence. Better luck next time, little fella. If you see one of these in the wild, it's crucial you give them the space they need, as many of them can be highly poisonous. Crikey! This animal lives in a dilapidated bachelor pad and is capable of eating his weight in pudding over a weekend. Crikey! This is the biggest Chinese I've ever seen. At a whopping 6'3" and 210 pounds, this bugger has a nasty habit of eating all of his brother's food. Camera pans to my anemic brother. Wow, would you look at that? This creature's diet consists of almost all caffeinated beverages, and when you give a whiff of the stench coming from his bathroom, it seems this little creature eats so little fiber that its number twos come out as an earthy, putrid, gaseous substance. This is one of the most dangerous habitats on Earth. This big guy is quite greasy due to his natural habitat of an engine bay. I believe he's extremely angry due to the loss of all of his 10mm sockets. He's getting quite angry when he's getting poked with a stick. Pokes me with a stick. Dude, get lost! Oi, this fine specimen was a hard one to catch. Now let's look at her. As you can see, changes make her stressed and anxious, and thus more aggressive. If provoked, she'll attack on sight. She's got the appetite of a great white. She's an omnivore, but eats meat more willingly. One odd thing about her diet is she loves broccolis. She eats anything that's prepared with them. See, this is why you take physical exercise seriously, kids. If you act like him and sit in front of a computer all day, it's real easy to pull a sneaky one on you. Nah, this isn't a beauty. Just look at the stretch marks on this big fella. Nah, this here is what we call a redditor, and despite their size, they're not particularly dangerous. See? Steve begins stroking my head, mesmerizing me into a calm, accepting state. While not common out in the wilds, these fellas like to stay in their little burrows where it's safe. Have to say, he's more scared of you than you are of him. I just sort of flop, limp on the ground, staring ahead and licking my lips. The redditor can grow to 3 times the size of a human. Truly remarkable, as it's always preparing to hibernate. This is why so many people think they're dangerous, is they'll catch them digging through the trash trying to find something to eat. But really, all this fella wants is a little love. This lad drinks too much. As you can see, the poor fella's diet consists mostly of Jack Daniels, which makes him relatively harmless in the wild. Pokes Jack with a stick. The sad creature tries to fight back with a wave of the arms and then gives up. This makes the boy relatively armless, so if you see him in the wild, don't be scared, just wave your arms about to confuse him like this. The sudden arm waving causes Jack to throw up and roll over, defeated, and the camera pans away. This creature is an easy one to spot. Always in the same spot on the sofa, most commonly seen with either Reddit or Animal Crossing. I don't know if this user got his celebrities that badly mixed up or if they just had a choice of words and lack of Australianisms that made me think of David Attenborough seeming more appropriate for it. Or more likely if I was just desperate to do anything other than my impression of an Australian icon who's been dead for 2 decades now. Most of these answers were submitted 5 years ago. Were people really understimulated enough during the pandemic that they were digging up old episodes of Crocodile Hunter to watch? I'm sitting in my chair, looking at Reddit on my laptop. I've had a few beers, smoked a bowl, and I'm relaxing. Then Steve jumps out from behind the chair, tackles me, and gets me in a headlock. Oh, easy fella. Easy there, mate. What the frick, dude? Steve, looking right at the camera that isn't there and struggling. Oh, look at him. He's nervous. That's all right. You're all right, fella. This here is a common specimen. You can tell by his surroundings and that he's given up on life and is just passing time until his eventual death. Cut to me no longer struggling, because who cares? Notice how he's given up struggling. Listen to that. Steve puts his ear to my mouth dramatically. That's the wheezing of a man who hasn't done any activity in ages. Notice his surroundings. Empty beer cans, crumbs on the chair, bottle of lotion and crumpled up tissues. I think I've found his nest. My wife walks out of the bedroom to see Steve on top of me in the living room. Oh, look at that. There's his mate. This here's a middle-aged housewife who looks to be giving up a bit herself. Notice the frown lines and her faded nightgown. Hey, screw you, you jerk! Oh, you're alright, Sheila. Steve turns his attention back to the camera that isn't there. Now, each of these specimens is a little different, but judging by the items in this nest and his mate, we can tell that this bloke hasn't had his yearly loveless mating in quite a while and is probably suffering from mild, undiagnosed depression. My wife cuts in, I'm calling the cops. Oh, crikey, I seem to have upset his mate, so I should probably release him into the wild before I get into too much trouble out here in the bush. Yep, hello? It's some Australian guy in cargo shorts and he's beating up my husband. You're alright, ain't ya? Yeah, he's talking to a wall like there's someone there? No, I don't know. Yes, thank you, please hurry. Steve picks me up and guides me back to my chair. I know I've seen these specimens many times in my career, but they always amaze me. Look how he sits there beautifully while he searches the internet for increasingly disturbing adult movies. Can't blame him, he's just trying to feel something. Anything, really. I'm always in awe of how resilient these species are. My wife sobs in the corner holding her phone as I just stare at Steve Irwin. What a beauty. And he leaves the house, backing away slowly. Wife and I are just left wondering what the frick happened. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? We've got an indigenous person to the Americas out of his reconstructed habitat. They were contained to a small portion of land only for this bugger to free himself from such limited space and find himself tangled in debt. Aye, she's a little shy, but we've got her. Feed her some sugary breads and she'll calm right down, even with a temper. Now, her primary predator is a spider. Once they see her, they go right for her. In response, she'll aggressively scream at it until another of her species comes by to kill it. This one's been known to scream for at least 5 minutes straight, even in the middle of the night. As you may have noticed, I caught this one on her own. That's because she screams at spiders while her neighbors and roommates are asleep. Because of the general mess of the surroundings, you might be surprised to know that this little fella here actually built or repaired almost all of this surprisingly nice furniture in his place. This species is tasteful, yet disorganized. I don't have an answer for this, but congratulations, it's probably the best question I've ever seen on the internet. I'm really upset that most of these comments boil down to, I'm a fat, lazy incel that just sits at my computer all day. Steve would love each and every one of you, and he'd have lots of interesting stuff to say about you, even if you are a fat, lazy incel. I think much more along the lines of jumping down on the couch next to you or throwing you in a back hug. Have to let the camera see your pretty face. Oh, look at this right beauty. The shiny coat means she's been getting good brushes lately. Good girl. Eating well, aren't you? Looks like she was here sunning herself. This particular species is known to lack vitamin D, so we're just going to put her right back down in her lawn chair to keep warm. Crikey, what a find. Oh, now looky what we've got here. This gorgeous specimen is genuinely happy. A real gem to find in its kind's age range. Whoa, boy. Whoa. This one's got some confidence, all right. Look at its gut. A true king here, I tell ya. A real chippy one, this one. I'm happy, and I know that that's not cool here in the comments, so please don't hate me too much. Thank you. Oh, this animal's nips are the size of small snarlers. Blimey! Amazing. This lazy fella ain't done the laundry in weeks, or checked his email. Have a look at this beauty. This magnificent specimen spends way too much time watching The Office. Steve approaches the bedroom quietly and lowly, beckoning the camera crew to come closer. This is a gentle little bugger, not much of a fight, and mighty gentle-like. Very slow reaction, like this. Steve begins waving his hands rapidly in front of the screen. I have no reaction. You see, these fellas like it when it's nice and warm, where they'll lie for days at a time just feeding on the light. They need this light or they'll die off. They're not particularly dangerous if you take them from their natural habitat. Steve readies a metal catchpole. In a flash, he switches The Office to C-SPAN. I go to an immediate frenzy, clawing at the air and howling. Steve reacts swiftly, netting me by the back with the catchpole as I thrash about madly. Quite a fighter now, ain't he? After minutes, I'm subdued, mad fear in my eyes as I drool on the ground. So remember, while they might seem gentle-like, if you startle them, you're going to be in for a bad time. He jumps on me and I go, what the fuck? Oh, check this fellow out. He's struggling and struggling. He's a nervous fella, all right, but he doesn't have too much muscle, or fat for that matter, so a skinny little bloke like him doesn't take too long to subdue. Oh, please, don't hurt me. It's all right. It's all right. I'm not going to hurt you. Now, this young fella never grew up with much interaction with other than his immediate family, so that's why he's scared and nervous. But don't feel bad for him. Since leaving his natural habitat, he's matured and he's finding his new habitat. And sooner or later, he's going to find a nice Sheila. Oh, frick! Oh, frick! Oh, wait, what? See? Once you give him some reassurance, he calms down and he shows his true nature. A calm, confident fella who only wants to prove himself to his neighbors. But little does he know, he's got a fine future ahead of him and he's done more than enough to prove himself. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Not a problem. You're all right, mate. And he releases me. I think I'm actually going insane reading these. I don't have anything insightful to add to this. I guess it's just nice that by now we've had somewhere people are a little bit kinder to themselves. This animal sleeps 12 hours a day and looks at different sizes of screens in the time he's awake. Now, the trick to not being overpowered by this wild beast is to hold your breath. It emits a noxious fume that'll render you unconscious if you smell it, and it'll induce you throwing up if tasted. Here we've got a wild Captain Brovados on Reddit. Once a Brovados reaches maturity, it engages an amazing ritual known as making mashups, resulting in Nickelback mixed with Mario Bros. And Vaporwave. Crikey, we've got a big one. We've just got a 220-pound degenerate weeb from its habitat known as the bedroom. This fella eats instant noodles and rice only and sleeps with its figurines, Rem, and Astolfo body pillows. When it can sleep, that is. This kind of weeb, with especially what's going on in the world, can watch 3 seasons in a day and still have time to play games instead of finishing his homework. Well, I'm gonna let this beauty go back to its natural habitat now. Whoa, the North American neckbeard. He must have run out of chicken tenders and left his nest in search of more. They're fierce crap posters, but they lack the necessary survival skills for the wild. Usually a Karen, their mother, will do the scavenging for them due to their lack of competence. Crikey, this one's a beaut. Now, don't pay the thrashing any mind. This Sheila gets real confused when having to interact with any human, but if she broke free, there wouldn't be any danger. She'd just stare awkwardly for a few minutes before scurrying off. Now, what's really weird about this animal is the spikes. Clearly they were meant at some point for self-defense, but easing of selection pressures for this species has meant that these spikes are almost completely pliant. Sometimes the poor Sheila's spikes can bend completely and shank her when she's trying to defend herself. Oh, look at this handsome devil. It's a little-known fact that this fella's capable of operating on as little as 3 hours of uneasy sleep. I've also observed him eat an entire bowl of fried rice, passing out for the night, then waking up and still being hungry. Crikey, I know it's hard to imagine, but this bloke makes it look easy. Wow, ain't she a biter? But gave up right quick, didn't she? This one here dyes her hair a vibrant red color because other members of her species compliment her on it every time she leaves her burrow, which is important as it encourages her to fight against her depression. That's a good girl. Off with you now. And then after he lets me go, I'd probably find a place to take a nap. My stamina is quite crappy, and struggling would have drained me very quickly. Now, this little creature is always looking for solitude and a way to escape human activity, so you can tell she's right mad at me. Look at her ears. You can usually find her hiding out in the woods and rustling around in the underbrush. However, we can't just let her do what she likes. We're going to have to move her to a new spot with loads of her kind, because I believe socialization is real important. Well, this one here is definitely a male. Look at them big, beautiful whiskers on this adult. We could take a look at his dangly bits to be sure, but it's typically only the males that exhibit this feature. Another thing I noticed right off the bat is this is one of the more pale examples I've had the pleasure of dealing with. These humans tend to be very adaptive to their environments and come in all kinds of shapes and colors. The pale skin tells me this fella's likely nocturnal, or at least spends most of his time hiding from the sun in some kind of den or cave or something. Notice the prehensile thumb and the orange powdery coloring at the tips of his fingers. This likely means Cheetos are his primary food source. Humans tend to be omnivores and will eat just about anything. You're a big guy, aren't you, mate? Alright, he's thrashing around quite a bit. I think we've stressed him out. I'm going to let him go. Whoa, look at him run. He's not very fast, but look at the way he raises up on his hind legs to get around. What a beaut. Now, this fella's long and lean, which would have suited him in his previous habitat. But he's had a bit of a spat with his feisty Sheila and now he lives out here in what we call a trailer in the woods. These normally social animals can become very standoffish if they endure trauma like this poor bloke. I'll keep an eye on this Sheila. If her mood gets her right, she'll bite your head off, not with her teeth, but with sarcasm. Oh, look at this bugger here, surrounded by electronic screens. The nerd is most comfortable in their computer hutch. From here they can see the world, people and goings-on without any direct interaction. Much like the owl, the nerd sits and observes. Unlike the owl, the nerd can't turn their head very far at all. Whoa, easy girl, easy. She's a nice girl, but she gets real nervous. Easy, easy, no one's gonna hurt you. See, she's a nice Sheila, but she's just scared so she's trying to fight me. But I've got her in a strong grip so she can't get me with those strong hind feet. You wouldn't want to be at the end of that kick. Now, I'm just gonna soothe her. Good girl. Easy, there you go. Take a look at how she just relaxes, now that she knows that I'm not gonna hurt her. Now we can get a good look at this girl, and the first thing you'll notice is how colourful the markings around her eyes are. She likes to use pigments to paint her eyes those beautiful colours. Scientists used to think she did this just to attract a mate, but she seems to do it just for fun. She's a beautiful little artist. You see in her paw there? It's alright there. I'm not going to take it from you. You see in her other paw she's holding onto a pencil. She used to do gorgeous drawings. Bloomin' clever. Right, I'm going to let her go now. That a girl? Now she knows she's not in danger, she's not going to bite, and she's not going to run away. And she just carries on with her drawing, and she's going to let me sit and watch her. What a beauty. What's a fact that's technically true, but that nobody understands correctly? When people order a steak rare or very rare, the red fluid coming out of the meat is not actually blood. But somehow a lot of people think this is a packing fluid of some sort. It's a protein which happens to be red like blood. The real blood of the beef would be clotted at that point in time, so your rare steak is not actually bloody at all. That whole statistic about half of all marriages ending in divorce, it may be true, but a lot less than half of first marriages end in divorce. The thing is that there are repeat offenders driving up the statistic. The rate's actually between 35 to 40% of first marriages that end in divorce. The factors that really affect divorce rates are age, education level, and if you've previously been divorced and whether your parents are divorced. That women are experiencing more miscarriages than ever before, when really we've just developed pregnancy tests that can detect pregnancy sooner. What was just a few days late on their period for women 20 years ago is now actually a detectable pregnancy. It's the same with chest cancer. We've increased early detection, but women aren't surviving the cancer for longer, they're just living the same amount of time but knowing they have it for a longer amount of time. That George Washington had wooden teeth. Wooden in the context they said it in means uncomfortable and never meant made of wood. It means he had painful teeth. People think my lactose intolerance is an allergy. Nope, my body just doesn't produce the enzyme to digest lactose. By the same logic, I'm allergic to cyanide and most biological weapons. It is possible to make every correct move in a game and still lose. Whether glass is a liquid or glass is a solid. I'm a physicist who studied non-Newtonian fluids. The best answer is, it depends on what question you're asking. There are very excellent theoretical situations where it makes more sense to group it with liquids, like when you're talking about some of the rheological flow properties of the material. And there are other situations where it makes more sense to group it with solids, like when you want to know if your glass bowl will hold your soup. If you want to be even more accurate, you'll stop talking about it as being exclusively a solid or exclusively a liquid, since the idea that there are only 3 or 4 types of matter is overly simplistic. Your shaving foam is not exclusively a solid nor exclusively a liquid. It's complex. Your body isn't exclusively a solid or liquid either. It's complex. Negative reinforcement is actually the removal of aversive stimuli. To explain it further, positive reinforcement is the addition of pleasant stimuli to increase the likelihood of behaviors. Negative reinforcement is the removal of negative stimuli to increase likelihood of behaviors. Positive punishment is the addition of unpleasant stimuli to decrease likelihood of behavior. And negative punishment is the removal of pleasant stimuli to decrease likelihood of behavior. Okay, that's fascinating and it actually makes perfect sense. So negative reinforcement isn't trying to make a person or situation feel bad, it's working to try and improve an environment to positively impact someone or their output. The more you know. The fact that there are more slaves in the world today than at any prior time in history. In terms of absolute numbers, that is correct. Percentage-wise, though, there are far fewer. They're mostly in South Asia and Africa, though human trafficking, of course, occurs in nearly all low- and middle-income countries. That I don't have to agree with you in order to understand you. For whatever reason, political conversations always seem to forget this fact. I'm pretty sure the logic goes, if he doesn't agree with me, he must not understand me, because if he understood my point, he'd agree with my conclusion. If an intelligent species 67 million light-years away from us looks into their telescopes and sees Earth right now, they'll see dinosaurs. I like the Futurama version where a civilization 1,000 light-years away watches our old TV shows. Assless chaps. It's redundant. Chaps are assless to begin with. Contraceptives. When it says the main male contraceptive is 97% effective, that doesn't mean every time you do the deed you have a 3% risk of getting pregnant. Those statistics are based on 100 couples a year. So if you do the deed regularly for a whole year, you have a 3% risk for that year. I just want to clarify that a lot of things change the effectiveness of contraceptives. As people have said, most pregnancies are due to user error. So learn how to properly use your protection and be as careful as possible. If you do this, the risk is much lower. Also, the 3% risk is not just from the Johnny failing or breaking, it's also affected by people who said that they've used them but forgot or just didn't use one. The moral of the story is no percentage of effectiveness is 100% accurate. Just be smart, be safe, and if possible, use 2 types of birth control. Birth control pills and rubbers both have around 99% effectiveness. Be safe, guys. Theories can only be falsified and never verified. However, this does not mean that every theory is equally valuable. The one lady who spilled hot coffee in her lap at McDonald's and then sued the company and won $2.9 million. So now everyone thinks it's easy as heck to sue and get big money. Lots of people think the court system and our laws are all messed up. I'm an attorney and I defend medium and small businesses against liability suits of all types. Let me tell you, people sue all the time over trivial stuff hoping to cash in, and most of the time they get their case dismissed, or they get a nominal settlement after they've invested tons of time and effort in their case and gotten exhausted and frustrated to the point where they just want the case to go away already. Also, most people don't know it, but the McDonald's restaurant where the injury happened screwed up by ignoring many complaints that their coffee was literally boiling and burning people. Plus, the lady who sued got really seriously injured and required extensive medical treatment. The kicker is, the judge reduced the jury's verdict from $2.9 million down to about $640K. McDonald's appealed this, and while the appeal was pending, the parties settled for a sum rumored to be about between $400 and $500K. Psychologist here. I think a really good one is that venting your frustrations makes you feel better. People take it for granted that talking about problems or distress makes you feel better without having a clue of why this works. People have no concept of why moving your vocal cords results in a reduction of psychological distress and anxiety. The answer is that when we discuss our anxiety, we're creating new memories that are more easily processed by the amygdala of the brain. Essentially, talking about your difficulties exposes you to them. The longer you have exposure to a stress-producing stimulus, the less your body reacts to it, hence you get a reduction in anxiety. Hakuna Matata. Yes, it does indeed mean no worries for the rest of your days, but the entire point of the movie is that it's a terrible mantra to live your life by. I don't know, yeah, Simba was using it to run away from his problems, but Timon and Pumbaa are making the best of their situations. Well, in a way, Timon and Pumbaa were running away too. That's part of the point. Because they'd been hurt when they were younger, they'd decided to basically abandon the world. There's a point in the movie where they have to make the decision between continuing that way or joining Simba and the rest of the world and creating a makeshift family instead of just a partnership. In doing that, they discover that they are genuine heroes. Pumbaa even beats the crap out of the hyenas all by himself. Gravity is almost the same in the ISS as where you are now, which means they can walk up there, right? No. The Earth is pulling on the astronauts in orbit almost as hard as it pulls on you or me. The difference is that they're in constant freefall, so they're weightless. We can also be weightless, but only for short periods of time. For example, a bungee jumper or a parachute jumper would be approximately weightless until the cord started stretching or until the chute opened. So the reason they don't hit the ground in the ISS isn't that there's no gravitational force pulling them towards the Earth, but that their very fast sideways motion, over 7 kilometers a second, makes them miss the Earth. If the ISS stood still relative to the Earth, it would crash into the surface within minutes. The whole thing about lions not being very good climbers but being able to jump 36 feet. Just no. They can leap 36 feet, as in ford 36 feet. They don't jump 36 feet into the fricking sky. Do you know how terrifying that would be? The human race wouldn't have survived because we'd have all had heart attacks while still in Africa. 36 feet forward is still rather impressive, though the human long jump record is 29 feet, so that does bring it into perspective a bit. I will never not laugh at the idea of a lion soaring through the sky at the height of a 2-story building, because my god, that would take the apex predator to a whole new level. Move over, Ridley Scott's Alien, there'd be a new top of the food chain. The Immaculate Conception is a Catholic doctrine about how Mary was conceived, not about how Jesus was conceived in Mary. The doctrine regarding the conception of Jesus is called the Incarnation. Chicago isn't significantly more windy than any other big metropolitan cities like Boston, New York City, or Los Angeles. The term Windy City to describe Chicago was first popularized to describe the political climate in the late 19th century. Don't Mess with Texas was actually a clean-up litter campaign and not a "We're American, don't mess with us" campaign. Texan here? I had no idea people didn't know this. It's a Texas littering sign. As a lover, am I going to be disappointed if I visit Virginia? Well, actually, yes. The slogan "Virginia is for lovers" was created by the Martin Agency, based out of Richmond, who do the commercials for many large companies like Geico and Oreo. The original slogan was going to be "Virginia is for blank lovers." the blank being whatever region was promoting itself, like Virginia is for history lovers for Williamsburg, or Virginia is for mountain lovers for Western Virginia, or Virginia is for beach lovers for the beach. The idea behind all of that was that whatever you loved to do, Virginia had it, but the test groups thought it would be too long, so they shortened it to Virginia is for lovers, and it's been misinterpreted ever since. I work as a software developer, but I don't know how to use all software applications that are available. Light is a wave and a particle. I've taken 2 years of university physics for engineers, over half of which was devoted to this concept, and while I understand that it's true, I still find it hard to comprehend. Life expectancy in the past being 30. The thing is, infant mortality rates were very, very high in a lot of eras, which brings the average age at time of death significantly lower. People definitely still lived till they were 70, and many people lived into their 50s. Dead babies are the cause of this misconception. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The right to free speech only protects you from legal repercussions. But don't you love it when people say something and scream bloody murder when they get social backlash, as if their freedom of speech should somehow protect them from your freedom of speech? A ridiculous extension of this is that people seem to think that freedom of speech equates to a right to be heard. I work at a newspaper. Every once in a while, someone will call in demanding we print something for them and citing their freedom of speech. I have a right for my story to be told. They never get it when we explain that we're not a state-run company and that it would be an infringement of our freedom of speech if we were forced to print something. Statistics as a whole and the way people can manipulate them to prove whatever they want. Yep, autism rates went up as more people got vaccinated, right? Well, so did the popularity of the internet, and the number of Starbucks worldwide, and the variety of gluten-free foods available. Wikipedia can be edited by anyone. That's true, but if you want your edits to be permanent, it's one hell of a lot harder. I freaking hate it when my teachers tell me it isn't a reliable resource. Do you see those citation numbers there, which? That you only use 10% of your brain. People misinterpret this statement all of the time. At any given time, you're using around 15 to 25% of your brain. As in, those parts show some measurable electrical activity at any instance. However, 100% of your brain is used in total over time. Everyone always loves to point out how wrong it is, but they're just not understanding what the quote is trying to say. It's less, you have some awesome brain powers if you could unlock some hidden potential, Hollywood, and more, you don't have the energy or the need to keep more than a certain amount of your brain active at any given time. The US education system is terrible. It can't compete with systems like South Korea's. First off, I live in South Korea. Some of them go to high school at 7 and leave at midnight, and then go to private schools for a few hours before going home to sleep. Their younger generations also have horrible mental health statistics as a result. Second, the US education system isn't necessarily bad, it's that inner-city schools completely throw off the middle. The debate shouldn't be about the education system, but how we treat these low-income districts. Many people have told me I'm full of crap about Koreans going to school. Well, I've lived and worked here for 5 years in the education system, and I'm married to a Korean. She told me she typically slept for 3 hours at night during her senior year and went to school 7 days a week. That's about 10 years ago, and it's gotten worse since then. I posted on Facebook about how most of you don't believe me, and my friends who also live and work here are laughing their butts off. Evolution. People say they believe in evolution, but then say they don't understand why there are still monkeys. And they say monkeys too, not apes. Some people really need to pick up a book from time to time. 100% of all people die within 6 months of their birthday, except for some people born on February 29th. The Monty Hall problem. Sometimes I'm thinking about it and I get this brief feeling of eureka, but then it quickly fades and I wonder how the heck it makes sense. And then I start thinking about all the things I'd bring to Let's Make a Deal, like a hard-boiled egg and an abacus, and wool socks and a spatula and a deck of cards. I'd be ready for anything. And then I think about the time I was sick in grade 8 and I stayed home and ate a full bag of barbecue Fritos and then tickled my pickle to the Let's Make a Deal models. Okay, all that latter stuff aside, when the narrator first saw the Monty Hall problem on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he had to go on an intense Google to have it explained to him. I guess to try and explain it succinctly, it makes sense if there are more doors. If you have a choice between your initial door or all of the remaining 5 doors, you'd pick the remaining ones, right? And once Monty Hall has opened 4 of those 5 doors, you're essentially choosing the section that contains the remaining probability outside the first door you chose. Honestly, just go and look at some diagrams. I'm aware that what I'm saying sounds just as confusing. There are so many people on Reddit that our inside jokes aren't really between a small group of people. A meme is not necessarily an animal advice-style image with text slapped on it. A meme is a cultural phenomenon that becomes viral. It can be an image, a saying, an idea, a joke, or anything really. 9 out of 10 times on Reddit, people are misusing the term. Almost all things can gain density when shifting from liquid to solid, but frozen water floats on liquid water. Now, I realize that most people who've gone through the modern education system are more likely to have a grasp of the crystal structure of water, but I also know that the general population doesn't have a solid grasp on the concept. Sure, people know that ice floats, but do they know why water is so weird? Do they know that at 4 degrees Celsius it's more dense than at 2 degrees or 6 degrees? I doubt it. Occam's razor doesn't say that the simplest explanation is usually the right one. It says that we shouldn't add unnecessary complexity to an explanation when a simpler one is sufficient. Meaning, you still need an explanation capable of fully explaining something even if the explanation is complex. Winnie the Pooh and Jack the Ripper have the same middle name. Coincidence? I think not. You don't get colds from being cold. Murphy's Law, stating that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. For those who may still understand it wrong, Murphy's Law is most easily explained from a programming or product design point of view. It states that you can't leave loose ends that could mess up your product that have a minutely small chance of happening and just bank on them not happening. If there's a way for your program or product to be messed up by your hundreds of thousands of consumers, it will happen, so you have to fix it. The customer is always right doesn't mean that in every argument or problem the customer is always right. The phrase is in regards to the market, and the customer is right in determining the demand the market must in turn supply. That women in the USA are paid 80% of what men earn. A lot of people still misinterpret this statistic as meaning that similarly qualified women are paid 20% less than men for doing the same job. The 80% figure is actually based on aggregate wage data. In short, it compares all of the money earned by women in all jobs to all of the money earned by men in all jobs. There certainly is a persistent wage gap between women and men, but it's more like 5%. Shaving with a razor does not make your hair grow faster or thicker. Well, that's not so much something people misunderstand, it's just something people are wrong about. That 0.9 reoccurring is equal to 1. Not approximately, but rigorously 1. That evolution is the survival of the fittest. Fittest for that particular environment and set of circumstances, not necessarily advantageous of all environments and circumstances. Blood is thicker than water. It means that those who've shed blood together, like soldiers, form a stronger bond than that shared by brothers, who shared the waters of the womb. It's not even just soldiers, it essentially means that the bonds you choose to form, the blood of the bond, are stronger than the bonds you're born into, the water of the womb. Pretty much all the facts involved in the Malaysia Flight 370 situation. Journalists try and simplify things like how the ping locator works, and then people read it and think they know how things work. Karma. Especially in the West, people talk about karma as if it's a causal mechanism that makes good things happen to good people and bad things to bad people. That's not what it is. Nothing can happen because of karma. Karma is an observation, not a mechanism. Karma literally just means action. As a philosophical principle, it simply refers to the fact that your actions have consequences. Treating people well generally makes them treat you well. Harming people earns you enemies. There are no cosmic forces at work here, it's just people cooperating and competing. God damn it, Todd, yet another thing you messed up in Fallout. Go and think about what you've done in your mansion with your millions of dollars. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle. The simplest explanation of it, the act of observing a particle in fact changes it, has been so fricking preverted by some philosophers and almost all practitioners of holistic medicine, it's sickening. The uncertainty principle has been frequently confused with the observer effect, evidently even by its originator, Werner Heisenberg. The uncertainty principle in its standard form actually describes how precisely we may measure the position and momentum of a particle at the same time. If we increase the precision in measuring one quantity, we are forced to lose precision in measuring the other. An alternative version of the uncertainty principle, more in the spirit of an observer effect, fully accounts for the disturbance the observer has on a system and the error incurred, although this is not how the term uncertainty principle is most commonly used in practice. Q-tips aren't meant for your damn ears. Correlation does not imply causation. This phrase should be written in stone in every school of the universe. Nobody getting that, especially in the media, is really something that can lead people to make very stupid choices. That all words are made-up words. All words are created by humans, yes, but they also have an agreed meaning in the community. Made up as in nonsense words have no agreed meaning in the community and often bear little resemblance to any pre-existing words in the speaker's native language. That the fricking saying is, "I couldn't care less." God damn it, America. The universe is expanding, but very few understand that it's happening at an accelerating rate, and nobody understands why. ADHD is a real disability, and it's also overdiagnosed. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The Pledge of Allegiance didn't have "under God" until the Red Scare in 1954. America was founded on the principle of religious freedom, not as a Christian nation. I live in the Bible Belt, so this is misunderstood by just about everybody down here. That hot water can freeze faster than cold water. Alright, so for the most part, cold water is going to freeze faster, but under certain circumstances, hot can freeze quicker. It's not scientifically clear why it does, and the one explanation that makes the most sense to me is that colder water can contain more dissolved gases. More dissolved gases can change the convection of the water, and higher convection can transfer heat and spread ice crystals faster. So, hot water wouldn't just instantly freeze faster than cold if they're in the same temperature without some phenomenon happening, just the same as it takes more effort to stop a train going 200 miles per hour than one going 30 miles per hour unless something helps it slow down. And any explanation someone gives is not scientifically accepted because no one's had a theoretical explanation that holds up experimentally, and vice versa, so pick your poison, I guess. What was the incident at your workplace? When I was 17, I worked the egg grill at a big university cafeteria. The grease, oil, and residue from cooking thousands of eggs each weekend would fall into a channel and drain into a removable metal trap about as long as my leg. Each night, we'd remove the trap, dump it, and put it back again. Sometimes we'd rinse it too. Anyway, as a new employee, I was overly eager to please everyone. I cleaned the trap with scalding hot water and tried to get it as clean as possible. That's when I noticed the trap felt heavier than it ought to be. It was only partially filling up, because at least 2/3 of it was filled with some sort of, well, blockage. So I started banging the trap. Hard. I kept flushing the top third with hot water and slamming the trap against the inside of a big garbage pail. Nothing was happening. I keep doing this over and over because little tiny pieces of congealed egg, and God knows what else, were breaking loose. Finally, I slam it once more, really hard, this time against the floor. Whatever was blocking the trap broke free, and this horrendous, frickin' grey and black sludge comes pouring out all over the kitchen. Words cannot possibly fricking describe it. The smell was like a living, breathing thing. A rancid mixture of purified egg, bacon grease, rotting flesh, and whatever the hell else was in there. It radiated instantly and irreversibly outward, slamming everyone in the kitchen like a punch to the face. So I heaved my guts up first. It wasn't even a question. I don't even think my mind fully realized what had happened. I was just blowing chunks out all over the floor in front of me. I dropped the grease trap and turned to run, and 3 other employees were also throwing up, 2 of them into Rubbermaid pails and 1 of them into the sink where he was washing dishes. People started running for the exits. That's what I remember most. This was at SUNY Stony Brook, on Long Island, and the Kelly cafeteria had about 30+ people working back there at any given time. We all met outside the parking lot, gasping for air, trying to figure out what to do. No one knew what had happened down there except for me, and they only knew something horrible had happened. When I told them I'd just cleaned the grease trap, they all looked at me horrified. "Nobody cleans that thing, we just dump it," they cried. "We haven't cleaned that thing in frickin' years." Needless to say, I was in charge of the cleanup. It involved a crap ton of bleach, several trips, and a steam hose. I found out a few more people chucked up in the outer areas too, out by the serving lines. One girl threw up into the bowl of salad she was chopping. Anyway, that's my story. Nothing will ever come close to that smell in my entire life. And from that, I derive a little bit of comfort. As absolutely vile as all of this is, I freaking love the idea of cleaning out an entire venue with one act of slightly overzealous diligence at your job. And your old boss can thank their lucky stars that this seems to have happened in a time when your local health inspector was less diligent than the teens flipping the food. This reminds me of my old boss's story of starting work at a locally well-known restaurant. He had taken the head chef opening as he was working on getting the funds to open his own restaurant and needed something to tide him over. First day, everything goes without trouble. Then at the end of the night, they start cleaning down the kitchen. He grabs a screwdriver and goes to dismantle the meat slicer so the blade can be cleaned, and someone tells him not to bother. Don't bother to clean the meat slicer? For real? He ignores them, starts taking the blade off, and everyone takes a step back before a putrid cloud of stank starts emanating from the 2 or more years' worth of rotten meat and cheese that had gotten stuck there. During his time there, the cleanliness standards were raised massively by him. But after he'd left and opened his restaurant, we had a chef join us from the other place, and he reported it to have gone to crap again since the boss left. Used to work in a cinema, there was a drunk guy being pretty loud and aggressive. There was a big guy sat in front of him who got a little annoyed. That big guy dragged him out of the screening. I think him and his wife left afterwards and demanded a refund. I work at a boarding kennel, and one day one of the dogs got out. It rarely happens, but it does happen occasionally. We all chased this dog for about an hour until they sent me back to the kennel in case someone showed up there while they were trying to capture it. I go back and I see about 30 minutes later that there's a traffic jam on the highway and there's a camera showing 3 people chasing a dog there. It was something straight out of the cartoons. All that was missing was the yakety sax music. Last week, someone accidentally sent an email intended for like 4 people to 8,800 people, pretty much the entire building. This triggered tons of people replying saying, "This isn't for me, take me off this email," which then evolved into tons of people emailing, "Quit replying all, everyone," which then turned into people sending memes making fun of the entire ordeal. In about an hour, I received 216 emails. 216 emails to 8,800 people is something like 1.9 million emails, not including actual work emails outside of this. All of this our email server had to process in an hour. A guy named Greg was one of the first to respond to the email explosion, and he had this little picture icon thing of a Jeep in his email signature, which consequently was on nearly every email from then on. It was after the first 150 emails or so, people were getting pretty agitated and still screaming to stop replying to all, when some brave soul replied all, commenting by saying, "Sweet Jeep, Greg." It was the freaking funniest email of all, and I completely lost it at my desk. To anyone who works at Chrysler Tech Center, sweet Jeep, Greg. One of the vending machines in work malfunctioned and set all of the prices to 0. People formed an orderly queue to loot the F out of it, and it was empty in less than 15 minutes. I work at a hotel, and my boss wasn't letting anyone talk about the fact that our graveyard clerk was fired for being caught on camera with a working girl in my boss's office. He's telling everyone he quit for another job. At a vet's office after closing, 2 male techs decided to take cushions off a couch, hold them out in front of their bodies, and then run at each other full force. Now, one is an average 180-pound man, the other is just under 400 pounds. The little guy goes flying and splits his forehead open on the wall corner. Now we have a work injury that needs to be reported unless he wants to foot the bill for obviously needed sutures. I don't remember what they decided or if they made up a story for workers' comp. We don't speak of it. There had been a few, but the one that sticks in my mind was when the HR department had crap rained upon them. There had been warning signs. The toilets on our floor took longer and longer to drain, but nobody thought about mentioning this to the facilities crew. Some kind of blockage had occurred in our plumbing system, however, we were unaware of the consequences this would have. I didn't see it all, but apparently it started with the smell of number 2, then a brown drip, drip, drip from the ceiling. Shortly followed by a torrent which ran along the office, coating 5 PCs and 2 people in their colleagues' crap. I turned up to see another member of HR holding a massive bin while a steady stream of light brown liquid poured out of the ceiling and filled it up. I gave them a wave and just went upstairs to our office. I was talking to one of HR about this event, as it's legendary, and she said, "I'll never forget that. It was my first day." Warehouse here, a guy in a hurry decided he'd climb 3 pallets high to grab a case instead of bringing the pallet down with a forklift. Well, he slipped and bounced on the concrete floor. Now, whenever someone does something unsafe, we call it bouncing. Where's Bob? Oh, he's in the overflow aisle bouncing around. The guy survived, but he's on permanent disability. Oh, I'll just make a list. The one time our manager punched a pregnant woman. The time our manager was arrested for tackling a guest. The time our manager was accused of lighting property of a foe on fire. And the 4 times our married manager slept with a much younger employee. Take note, these were all different managers. I don't know whether to be relieved that this wasn't the same guy, because on the one hand, if you do any of these things, obviously you need to go. But on the other hand, the negligence of someone who'd let a staff member do all of these things would be epic, even for the restaurant industry. I work for Autoliv, a major manufacturer of automobile safety devices, primarily airbags. We have a lot of on-site recycling facilities and processes, one of which takes the fired igniters out of used airbags to be recycled for parts, but first has to be cooked in a giant furnace to set off any remaining unfired explosives. We also do this for competitors to help them save money and to make us money. Long story short, we received some igniters we don't normally see or process. They ended up going off while being carried to the oven, setting off a chain reaction and blowing a hole in the side of the building. Only one guy was injured with minor burns and temporary hearing loss. I was working down the hill in another building about a quarter mile away, and it sounded like a jet breaking the sound barrier right overhead, twice in less than a second. The cause was the igniter they were not used to handling being more sensitive. The guy was walking with a tray full and one went off, boom. I worked at a Dairy Queen in high school, and one day when I wasn't working, the crew decided to initiate a new guy by making him go south of the border on a realistic male member, complete with the stones made of soft serve. They took him into the back, away from the cameras, to do it, but he left a note for the owner to check the cams the next day so he could see them making the ding-dong out of ice cream and taking him to the back. The entire shift, except for the victim, was fired the next day for allowing it to happen. Needless to say, I'm glad I wasn't working that night. I worked at a hospital, and it was pretty much that a group email was sent out to see what people wanted for lunch. It was pretty much the entire floor. But somehow one of the guys replied but had copied in a conversation he was having with a girl he was doing the deed with, which revealed she was potentially pregnant. She worked on the same floor. I was the first one to notice and pointed it out to him. He frantically went from desk to desk asking that they please delete it. This one guy cranking it in the washroom, but not in the toilet stall. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A while back, I apprenticed at a small furniture workshop for a few months. The total number of employees was 4. The boss/head woodworker, myself, a night shift finishing pro who I'd never met, and the general laborer. The entire workshop was cluttered on a good day and downright treacherous on a bad one, but somehow things got done. One day we were rolling out the fruit of 2 weeks of hard work. A complete kitchen set in rich natural rosewood, kind of a traditional Asian aesthetic kind of thing. Lots of delicate little crossbeams that I'd had to hand sand one by one. We wrap individual segments in moving blankets and had them ready for loading into the company truck. And then disaster strikes. I hear the sounds of argument from inside the workshop, and the general laborer comes rushing out. I only learned the details later, but apparently our boy was good friends with the Colombian dancing dust and got caught snorting a bump right off one of the workbenches. The boss tells him to get his stuff and get out immediately, which sends him into a frothing rage. He grabs a sledgehammer and goes to town on the kitchen pieces, annihilating 2 weeks and several $1,000s worth of work. This is when I learned an important lesson. Never mess with a man's creations, especially if they put bread on his table. The boss threw a heavy spanner in the newly unemployed snowhead's face, knocking him the heck out. That was around the time I realized woodworking might not be for me after all. I only stayed around long enough to finish remaking the kitchen set and for the boss to find a replacement for me. Well, that was that one day one of the network guys was chatting up one of the female ops in the data center. He put his hand out to lean on a post and hit the emergency power cutoff switch. No, we didn't have a cover on it at the time. The data center goes dark. Attempts to turn power back on and fried the UPS. 8 hours later, the UPS was bypassed and we got systems back up and running. I used to work at McDonald's, and one time we had a girl cleaning above the deep frying vats with a cloth. There were lots of oil splashes up into the stainless steel. Anyway, she dropped the cloth into the vat and without thinking reached in and grabbed it. She deep-fried her hand and now has permanent scarring and nerve damage. For those wondering, the skin kind of fell off, like when a snake sheds its skin, leaving raw red patches all over her hand. Someone, still unidentified, poisoned a female co-worker's soda with bleach and some still unidentified substance. She survived and is fine, but someone who I work with tried to kill a co-worker. Did she stay at that workplace? Because I really hope that either there were massive changes at that place or that she was moved to from-home work, because it's just crazy. What kind of compensation can you get from your coworker trying to poison you? And what do you do if you don't know who did it? By golly, working retail, we've got quite a few of them just at our store alone. Some of the short versions are as follows. One of the old supervisors, before I started working there, had a thing for one of the managers. It got to the point where everyone knew and it got extremely weird and creepy. After this going on for a bit and him being rejected once, the manager moved out to another state to work for another one of the stores. This guy followed her to the next state, followed her, entered her car, shanked her and threw her body in the field and then stole the car. He was caught very shortly after. Another time, there was a guy in the first week I started working there that was just not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He wasn't a bad guy, just a tad sleazy and not bright. So, one day his girlfriend asks him if he wants to go swimming because she was going very shortly. He was not even midway through the shift at this point, and in his mind he begins thinking of what he can do to go home. Instead of just saying he isn't feeling well or finishing the gosh darn shift, he thinks, hey, maybe if I line the bathroom in toilet paper and light it up, I can go home. So that's what he does. He lights the bathroom on fire. The alarm goes off, all the employees and customers are confused at this point and start to leave. Then our almighty Lord and Savior store manager comes and tells everyone it's a freaking drill and it's okay, while the bathroom is on fire, and he just proceeds to turn off the alarm. Well, when the fire and police departments start showing up, he gets torn a new butthole by the fire marshal, and then after a quick look on the cameras, lo and behold, Mr. Poolgoer was termed on the spot. Then there was the sad one. There's not much to it, again it was before my time, but an employee was super depressed and wanted to end things, so he decided the best place to go would be the stall in the men's bathroom. He didn't succeed though and has now thankfully gotten some help. Then there was the phantom crapper. After store hours, one of our janitors was going through the trash again. They normally clean them once all the customers are gone and once more before leaving. So this janitor smelled something a little odd. After taking the garbage out of the pail, right at the top are a pair of crappy boxers. He cleans it up and continues cleaning. At the end of the night, when we have our little daily meeting, after myself and the manager are done speaking, the janitor says, "Oh, by the way, one of you left your poopy pants down my garbage pail." We all laugh a bit and he explains that after we closed, someone had cramped themselves, tossed the underwear in, and was running around commando. Nobody ever fessed up. Then came the incident on the most wonderful time of the year. Two of our Christmas associates had a problem with each other outside of work before their hiring. After working together for a bit, the two made this apparent. Snarky remarks here and fiery glares there. One day, the two went on their break together, they got into an argument in the break room and after getting into it a bit, one of them took out pepper spray and unloaded on the other employee. We found out after she came out screaming. Worked at a big warehouse for an electronics wholesaler. Some kids trespassed and got trapped in a container because the mechanism broke when they shut the door. They were only in it for 5 or 6 hours. They got in around midnight. The first shift workers came in around 6 a.m. But the parents were furious and the management exploded over the kids managing to get past the security guards. The deputy manager exacerbated things by thinking it was funny and joking that the kids nearly got shipped off to Taiwan or something. The parents didn't see the funny side of that. I don't know if the parents ever followed through on threats to sue, but I do know the guards had a lot more rules to follow and empty containers had their locks locked while open, if that makes sense, so the doors couldn't physically shut. Bonus, it later turned out that the mechanism wasn't even broken, the kids just weren't thinking straight and were turning the bolt the wrong way. They could have left at any time. I was controlling at an adult club where people take off their clothes for money. The controller is the person who sits there while you get a dance to make sure nobody's breaking the law. We had the waitress come up and tell us that someone downstairs was looking for a guy who had just booked one of the dancers for an hour. I assumed it was one of his mates, so I dismissed it with, "Tell his friend he can hold his own eggplant for an hour." When the waitress goes, "It's his wife. She says they had a flight to be on and she found him when she checked where his credit card had been used." I damn near crapped myself laughing, and we went to get the unfortunate patron. He was crowing, "Oh no, I'm single, I don't have a wife," on, until he walked downstairs and saw her and muttered, "Oh," and walked out with her with his tail between his legs. Kudos to the wife, she was trying so hard not to lose her crap at the staff and the dancer, I'll bet he got fricking slaughtered later. I spent over a year in those clubs, and it was the only angry partner incident ever. One office affair got leaked to the media, and the husband of the woman involved accused the man involved of coercing or forcing the wife into doing the deed. I used to work at an armored car company near Boston. We had an inside job one day. It was super frickin' intense until we pieced together what had happened. So here goes. The truck pulls up to the normal stop. The driver's cousin gets on the truck. The truck drives around to Lawrence, a crappy town north of Boston, for 45 minutes and stops at its normal stop to pick up more money. The truck then drives to the cousin's house. The cousin makes 2 trips, bringing duffel bags into his house. The truck drives away and finishes another hour of its route. 2 hours later, pulls up to Lawrence Police Station to report robbery that happened 2 hours and 5 miles ago. Said they were robbed by a 6.5-foot Asian man. 2 hours after arrival at the police station, driver and partner are under arrest. Well played, men. One of my mates works at a fish store. Somebody was sacked for punching a catfish. Wait, an aquatic bottom feeder or a date who showed up looking nothing like their picture? And here's another dad joke that 2 commenters set up. Why would someone punch a fish? Because you have to batter catfish before you fry them, silly. Guy gets a DUI one night. In the army, well, in my unit, this means his chain of command all the way up to the company goes to see the brigade sergeant major. This isn't really a rare occurrence, but if you get a DUI, you're more or less regarded as a crapbag and you're gonna get kicked out. Fast forward a few months, the guy's separation paperwork is close to done and he should be out soon. We have a training rotation across the country coming up and the commander needs a driver. We don't have enough bodies, so the commander works out a deal to save him from the separation if he'll drive for him in the training exercise. The deal is done. The guy's a fairly seasoned soldier and has combat deployment under him and does really well at the exercise. Even gets an award and people have changed their mind on him. The weekend after getting back from the training exercise, the guy drives drunk around post, drifting and drag racing and doing dumb crap in his Mustang. He loses control and drives through a fence and hits a particularly expensive military vehicle. The military police are called and arrive at the scene. They try and arrest him, but he sucker punches one in the jaw, breaking the guy's jaw and his hand. Another MP tackles him and he goes to jail. Same situation as the first paragraph happens again, and on Sunday night he's released from jail and he's told to show up Monday morning. He does not show up on Monday morning. His leadership goes to his barracks room. The place is ransacked. The guy went AWOL. They wait a few days. The guy updates his Facebook with his new location and pictures of him. This goes on for a couple of months. The guy's stepmother drives him from Kentucky to Wyoming, where his father is going to sneak him into Canada. The father is drunk and can't drive and refuses to help at all. Stepmother starts fighting the father. Cops get called to the house. Guy goes to hide in the house. Cops defuse the domestic situation and take the father into the house. They hear rustling in the attic and the guy falls through the ceiling right in front of the cops. Last I heard, he's doing time at a military jail somewhere. What terrible fact did you not realize about your spouse until after you married them? My cousin found out her fiancé was cheating on her the night before the wedding. His response was, "This is how the world works, grow up." The only person she told was my sister, and she was too scared to cancel anything the day of. My sister didn't tell me until we'd left the area, probably a wise choice. I have a temper and the buff fiancé would probably have kicked my butt, so nobody could do anything. The marriage, thank God, only lasted about 2 months or so. The best part about it was my near-comatose grandmother hearing about it, getting out of her chair and saying, "I'm gonna kill that son of a witch." Got married to the wrong person when I was way too naive and inexperienced. Found out after we'd got divorced that he'd been doing the deed with his stepmom since he was 15. My ex-wife was bipolar with tendencies towards not wanting to be alive anymore. When we fought, it got progressively worse until she started threatening to delete herself over just about anything. I divorced her 4 years ago. She finally went through with her threats a few years after that. I feel a tremendous amount of guilt, even though I might not have been able to change what seemed like the inevitable. As unenthusiastic as he was about doing the deed, he hated himself enough to screw anyone else who'd tell him he was a great guy. He was bad with money. Imagine getting your paycheck, spending $60 on green herb, then buying a Nintendo Wii, maybe an Xbox, some games, not used, new games, maybe even a game that comes with night vision goggles. Then spending more money on yourself because, I work hard, I deserve to enjoy my paycheck. Imagine being 10 months behind on rent with your cable and cell phone turned off, being over $1,000 in debt to the gas and electric companies respectively. Do that for over a decade, never getting better. My rent has been on time for over a year now, my car payment is on time, my bills are paid and I can sleep at night. I have hardly any money left over, but I don't care, it's better this way. She has horrible hygiene habits, particularly oral hygiene. It's continued to deteriorate over the years. FML. As a recently married person, these comments are really depressing and I need to leave now. I was going to post something about how my wife leaves dirty dishes around and doesn't clean up after herself, but now I think I'm just going to go give her a hug. Perspective is one hell of a thing, isn't it? Yeah, maybe I need to come back and look at this when I think that my partner has sent me one too many cat stickers at any given moment. He was a lying, lazy, selfish slob who wanted a housekeeper and breadwinner combo. We didn't have the opportunity to live together before we got married. I didn't get to meet his family. He pretended to like everything I liked, and he wooed me with beautiful songs. He dropped all pretense after we married. He wanted to quit work so he could, quote, work on his music. Dude, you're good, but not that good, or that motivated. He wanted 2 bedrooms. Intimacy? I'll just go to your room and do my business. Business? Frick you, I'm out of here. In short, I fell for a honey-voiced pretender. You know, while we were dating, she seemed to be an industrious, independent woman. Now, all she wants to do is quit her job so she can sit at home, clean and cook for maybe an hour a day, and read raunchy vampire novels. Seriously. While I feel your pain, I'm honestly more angry about raunchy vampire novels being a genre these days. I keep asking my girlfriend if I can do this. She refuses me too. Those novels don't read themselves, you know. You know, my wife would probably say that it was my substance addiction. I hid it from her, and then about a year into our marriage, she found out. It was pretty messed up of me to hide something like that from her. She stayed with me when she could have left. We're as happy as we've ever been now, and I'm not living a lie anymore. Not me, but my brother. He and his ex-wife were living with her parents, trying to save money to buy a house. After 6 years or so, they should have had about 80 grand in the bank account that she had controlled. He looked one day and there was 7 grand in there. She was a closet gambler and peed away about 73 grand. He didn't even know their wedding was paid on credit cards. Of course, he knows now that he was not very smart to blindly trust her with their savings like that, and yes, they are divorced now. That she was way too immature to deal with real-life issues because she'd never had to deal with things on her own. She went from relying on her parents to working a dead-end job, eventually quitting that one too, and then to relying on me. The first 6 years were great. Then crap hit the fan. It all went downhill from there. Well, my wife liked sausages. Lots of sausages. Sausages that didn't belong to me. Damn, this blew up. Just like those members in her face. Long story short, I was a bit of a doormat. She cheated on me about 8 times. Yes, 8. I just felt like I needed her. After I got over her leaving, I felt frickin' fabulous. I met my fiancé and I've never felt this happy before. So the story had a happy ending. Just like every guy my ex runs into gets. That despite him seeming like a modern man when I met him, washing his share of the dishes and cooking, and apparently liking me for being a non-traditional, non-housewifely woman, that was just his courtship personality. As soon as we got married and bought an apartment, we'd lived together for a year before marriage, he suddenly revealed that he expected me to do far more of the housework than him, although we both worked the same hours, and he'd bully me into accepting all of his decisions about everything, and get angry if I ever disagreed with him. When I finally left him, he said, "How can you not be happy with me? I never hit you," which to me kind of said it all. My husband started out with the fantasy of wife swapping. We talked about it often. I wasn't really into it, but he persisted. He told me I was boring and we needed to spice things up. He went on websites and chatted up other couples. Fast forward a couple of years, he put undressed pictures of me on AFF, used my real name, chatted up guys all the time telling me that I was good in bed, even though I was, quote, too curvy. This went on and I had zero self-confidence left. I'm finally leaving him, but the only reason I'm still alive is that I have a son, and I don't want him to grow up thinking about women the way his father does. My wife and I got married after knowing each other for 5 months. I found out pretty quick that she was insanely jealous. I literally couldn't turn my head without her coming unglued. It didn't help that I was something of a pig. The good news is we worked it out and are still happily married almost 39 years now. She is still the most beautiful woman I've ever met and is my best friend as well as my wife. 3 kids and 7 grandkids as well. People can change if you give them the chance. It kind of feels as though his wife came into the room at the end of his first paragraph. When my brother married, he discovered that my sister-in-law likes to clean. A lot. She found out that my brother is extremely messy and is grouchy all the time, not just when he's hungry. But they're actually happy. Now she's a little bit less obsessed with cleaning everything, and he is much cleaner. That he has severe anger issues and goes all Jekyll and Hyde on me regularly. I've told him that he needs to seek help or we'll need to go to counseling together, and he's just refused both. I'm a mental health nurse, but he needs hardcore therapy beyond our 4 walls. This morning, he woke up because the cat was scratching the carpet. He proceeded to yell at me for 30 minutes, stomp around the house searching for the cat so he can skin her and hang her from a tree. I asked him several times to stop yelling. He said that I should be as upset as he is. And I wasn't. He put his ring on the dresser and is now sleeping downstairs. He wanted my rings back. They're sitting on the dresser next to his. The next move is his. I've told him his anger would be the end of us, and it seems like he's made his choice. Update, I wrote him a letter asking him to spend the day thinking about life without me. He called me and told me to give him his effing ring back. The last lines of my letter were, "I love you, I want to give you your ring back." Now he tells me that if I don't declaw the cat, then we're over. The cat is 9 years old. I think declawing is inhumane, and he knows that. I sarcastically responded, "You might as well just put her down." He said that was a good idea. I told him it's a terrible idea, and his values are messed up. Now I'm at work, and this will be a long day. In case any people were wondering how this relationship turned out, the username is married too soon. I tried to dig up some confirmation on whether this meant they'd finally finished things with their partner, but there was no solid confirmation outside the name. Well, I didn't marry too soon, but definitely too young and immature. He was as well. X and I married at 25. Life got tricky at 30 with our first kid. He'd been the driving force behind having kids, but didn't like how it changed his lifestyle. Second kid at 32. That kid was sadly born very sick and nearly didn't make it. My partner couldn't cope, and started having an affair with a woman at work. Within 18 months, he'd run off with her. He left me holding the bag with a disabled kid. He married that woman from work, and he's finally grown up now at the age of 46. They have an adopted kid, but also a full-time nanny and tons of household help and money. They don't have the daily life stresses we'd had. He's trying to be involved with our kids, but he's mostly just Uncle Daddy and buys them stuff. I'd have to say that I found out too late that I have anger issues I developed from the way my parents raised me, but thanks to my significant other, they're nearly gone. He was violent and controlling and just overall fricking insane. Like throwing a hissy fit in the grocery store because I wouldn't buy him stuff to make deluxe iced tea. Look, I wouldn't mind buying stuff to make iced tea, but he got it in his mind that he was going to make these incredible iced tea concoctions with gourmet tea bags, and he wanted $30 worth of the bags. I suggested he just get the normal stuff, and he flipped out. I was the only one working, so he didn't have the money for it anyway. But he flipped out so hard, and I bought it for him, and he tried making these tea creations and ended up hating them and throwing them all out. It's just one of those examples that stuck out to me. We had a similar situation when he apparently needed a chimney, and he broke the damn thing, making a fire and getting drunk with his friends within the week. Now I look back, and I should have seen the warning signs, but you never think your husband is going to slam you on the kitchen floor for disagreement over a chicken recipe. He also slept with one of my friends, although I never confronted either of them about it, because I didn't even give a crap and was just tired of it all by that point. Then he left me, and it was freaking awesome. It was actually the nicest thing he's ever done for me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My ex and I got married when I was 19 and she was 18. She used procreation for no other purpose than as an acquisition tool. She never enjoyed it, in her words. When I could no longer give her anything new, she used it with other guys for the same purpose. She had a crap job, yet somehow managed to buy new clothes and purses, even a car. I was extraordinarily naive, I kinda still am, so I just figured they paid her well. Turns out I didn't know what they were paying her for. I ended up becoming a sort of zombie. Getting up, going to work, bringing back paychecks and giving them to her. We were married for 7 years and I only actually took one vacation, which was a week, that entire time. The main reason I never noticed her cheating on me was that I wasn't there. I was always at work. 1997 was a lost year for me. I don't remember anything that happened that year at all. I lost my 20s. While my younger work friends were going out to clubs, to concerts, to festivals, I was working. I was constantly trying to make our lives better because I thought cash would do it. I was never actually single until after my divorce, when I was broke and single, which meant I was still unable to enjoy those things, and I was 28 when it was finalized. In short, I was very naive, and naive people shouldn't get married. It's bad for them. You know what? I don't think I want to get married. Thanks, everyone. My wife had never eaten an orange. Man, I want to punch my mother-in-law sometimes for that crap. From my married best friend, that there were other women willing to do the deed with him. To clarify, he's a good guy and he's never cheated. He just wonders if he settled too early by marrying his first and not ever being with another woman. We'll go out to a bar and a girl will start talking to him, they'll hit it off, and then I can absolutely see him deflate when he has to wish them goodnight or the conversation requires him to be honest about his marital status. I think, like a lot of guys that settled down early and after only 1 or 2 girls, he just wonders what it would be like to have done it differently. I bet when you're married it's a lot easier to talk to and meet other women. Like they see the ring and automatically assume that you're just being nice or friendly and you're not some creep. Am I wrong in that thinking? Well, it's true. If an old guy is talking to me and getting too friendly, I get creeped out. But if he has a wedding ring, somehow I assume he has kids and his friendliness is purely paternal, so I let my guard down. It's naive and it's gone against me sometimes, but that's the way it works. I don't know that we got married too soon. We'd been living together for 4 years, and so far we've been married for nearly 14. He presented himself as someone with goals, as someone who expected to make some money. I never expected nor wanted him to be the sole earner, but he earns literally nothing and has never bought in much. No big deal, really. We do have fun, we do the deed a lot, and we generally get along. The problem is we now have children, and he still refuses to work outside the home. In fact, since the children have been born, he's more stubborn than ever. Saying his dad was always off on business trips, but he's going to be here with his kids. The problem with this is that I only make $11 and some change an hour. I have 2 little preschool-age kids. He quit his job after the first one was born, and due to me being laid off mid-pregnancy, I'd switched to his health insurance. So that was gone. So I basically work, sometimes even overtime if I can get it, and have to scrounge for SNAP and Medicaid, which I personally find quite humiliating. There's rarely ever dinner ready when I get home, the house is a mess, and he's always yelling at the kids. Yelling at me. Breaking stuff when he's mad. He kicked 2 holes in a door, put a hole in one wall, and ripped the trim off the corner of one wall so far. He's often yelling and literally crying with tears that no one appreciates him. We put the kids to bed around 8 p.m. and he yells at them to go back to sleep when they wake up at 8:30 in the morning. That's 12 frickin' hours. They don't need to sleep anymore. He stays up until 4 a.m. playing video games, then wants everyone to have sympathy and walk around on eggshells because he's tired. Go the frick to bed earlier or suck it up in the morning and stop acting like a gosh darn toddler. You have actual toddlers to take care of. In short, I married a childish man who behaves like a toddler. Presented himself as peaceful, mature, calm, and responsible. Isn't. Okay, yet another profile with very few updates on how things ended up after this pretty grim state of affairs. I will say that this man does not sound like he's doing well mentally, and that I would suspect that this is down to a lot more than him just being lazy. But you and the kids do deserve someone who contributes better than that and doesn't actively stop you from enjoying your lives. He's a completely different person around his very religious family. He talks down about me to his family to make himself look better. He hired his friend to ask my friends about any dirt they had on me. He lies, like a lot. He has anger issues. He's never physically hurt me, he's just been angry. Since his mother cleaned up after him, he doesn't do it himself, even now. He is super self-conscious. He cries easily, he hates me asking questions about his religion, and gets angry when I do. He talks way too much. He acts dumb when he's confronted about things. He spends money we don't have on things we don't need. He snores, although that's a new development. He puts cigarette butts in his pocket and never empties them when the laundry is done, leaving a wonderful smell that makes the clothes need to be re-washed again. He doesn't see the weirdness in having a conversation with anyone and everyone, everywhere, about things that do not need to be said to strangers. Like, I really don't think this random person standing behind us at Walmart gives a flying F about how you were raised and how many centimeters dilated I am when I was pregnant. Damn, why didn't I wait a bit longer? I will say that he's become a great dad. He wasn't at first. He'll admit that himself to people if the conversation comes up. He was jealous of all the attention my daughter was getting with the co-sleeping, feeding, and the colic baby. Also, I had some pretty bad anxiety that my child was going to die if I didn't have someone watching her while I slept, so I rarely slept, but he often slept more than 12 hours a day, which I thought was fine because he couldn't do much anyway, or at least I thought so at the time anyway. He isn't allowed to use any kind of physical discipline with her either. This took a lot of talking about to get him to understand that the Bible is bullcrap when it says, "Spare the rod, spoil the child." I will not stand for biblical raising of our child. She will not be going to a church or be learning about religion unless she asks about it. I do not want her to be scared into religion. This is where his family and I have our issues. Okay, thanks everyone. I'm not upset with my wife anymore. I'm going to go give her a big hug and tell her how much I love her. He didn't tell me that I was proposed to a week after he secretly slept with his old girlfriend to determine which one of us he preferred, and he decided that I'd likely put up with his crap more than she would. It wasn't love, as I was assured, it was merely convenience for him. I found out the day we divorced 16 frustrated, uncomprehending years and 3 bewildered but patient children later. Oh, is that why you treated me like a second-class citizen after the first couple of years, and why you never paid attention to the kids despite them being the 3 most considerate, smart, good-looking, talented kids anyone could hope for? Is that why you spent any extra money you made on your expensive hobbies? Like sports cars, 5 motorcycles and motorcycle racing, target pistols and bullet-making gear, fly fishing gear and stuff that you swore was like investing and that we could always sell later at a profit. And yes, as you've probably worked out, that was grossly optimistic. You spent it on those things instead of clothes or shoes or, God forbid, college savings for the kids. Why you screamed at them for walking between you and the TV while you were busy downing your 12 tall boys a night beers. Why you never wanted to work for a company that could provide insurance for us because you wanted to only work for yourself because you, quote, didn't want to take orders, so I had to make sure my jobs provided our insurance and clothes and shoes and groceries and activities. Why you spend more time, money, and attention on your friends than your supposed loved ones. Why you moved us 900 miles away from my family on a whim, and then moved us 1,000 miles to live with your parents for a while when your whim didn't work out. Why your parents provided you with a house, which you later trashed after the divorce, and then another because you needed a place to live and you didn't want to pay the rent the way the kids and I did, so you never paid your parents any rent or second mortgage payment, or offered a dime toward property taxes because they evidently owed you a goddamn living. I'm glad you married the woman you left us for now, since she's stuck with you, but you could have saved us all a lot of problems if you had just been honest in the first place, you F-wad. I'm sorry for the rant, everyone, but I feel better now. Thanks for giving me a place to do so. She never told me that she was ace. It's taken me years to piece it together, but doing the deed was always the thing we fought over. She constantly made the excuses for why she didn't want to. We've been married for 10 years and we're in our early 30s. I have fibromyalgia and I'm unable to work, and she has an anxiety disorder. We're high school sweethearts, and through a lot of bad times and intimate living conditions, our communication has gotten better. I actually approached the topic with her last week and she was hesitant at first. After understanding what heteroromantic asexualism meant, she has a much better understanding of herself. He liked to do the deed with other men. I married a man I'd been dating for 3 months because on our second date he broke down and confided in me that he was dying of terminal leukemia. He said he wanted to make the most of his remaining months and marry me. Being 23 and dumb, I believed him without asking for any proof and said yes. My family all rallied behind me, believing him to be a dying man, and threw us an incredible wedding even though they barely knew the guy. He refused treatment, playing the "I want to die with dignity" card, and finally, after 4 months of marriage and no decline in his health, I confronted him. It was a lie, an elaborate lie. My husband is a sociopath and a pathological liar. I wish I'd known that. Alright, teachers, how did a substitute teacher wreck your class while you were gone? Okay, so when I was a substitute, I got a lot of requested jobs because the substitute pool was so poor. One such example given to me was a substitute who would just go to sleep. I barely believed it. Once I was teaching full-time, I had a sub come in for a day, and when I got back, my students told me that he told them to leave him alone, sat down, and went straight to sleep. And it's at that moment that I believed how poor the pool was. When I was in high school, I had a sub do this. We all left early except for a few kids. One of the kids told us later that when the sub woke up, he noticed that all the kids had left, looked at the remaining kids and asked them why they hadn't left yet. Great times. I was a teacher's assistant while in college. The teacher and I took a week-long workshop and had a sub. The worst thing she did was not letting the kids go potty. It was in kindergarten, and she said all of the kids going to the bathroom were interrupting the class. So one girl peed herself. The school policy was that if kids under a certain age had an accident, the nurse would give them a pull-up, basically a diaper to wear. The substitute proceeded to make fun of the girl for wearing a diaper and calling her a baby and such. The little girl ended up facing repercussions at home, too. It was devastating to hear about. I came back, after being gone 1 day, mind you, and my students told me the sub had flipped over tables in rage and was escorted from the building by a cop. So some of this was just student gossip, but what actually happened is that the sub left the room to take a 20-minute phone call, and the kids thought it would be funny to flip the tables over. The substitute then had to flip the tables right side up while yelling at the kids. No arrests at this point. Then, during lunch, my special ed co-teacher came into my room to set up and caught the sub making out with a girl. Turns out she was 18 to his 25, and the 20-minute phone call from earlier was to set up this little lunch rendezvous. The principal then had him escorted from the building by the resource officer. This is why I say having a sub is more work than just coming into school my damn self. That sub gave out snacks that I bought with my own money that I kept for the kids who stayed after to get tutoring. They threw out a broken electric pencil sharpener that the kids broke in front of her, which, again, I bought with my own money and couldn't get replaced by the company because I had no product to send back. I still don't have a sharpener in my room after that. They let the kids go through the things in my cabinets and desks. I lost a bunch of stuff that way. Okay, I'd always kind of grouped substitute and real teachers together in the respect I placed on them, but I guess that subs have this reputation. For the record, I'm certain there are many very dedicated and passionate subs out there as well. Didn't stop us from making their lives hell when I was in school. They asked a deaf kid to take off his hearing aids. The kid tried to tell her that he needs them to hear, but to her, they look like headphones. The same teacher cried when she was confronted by another teacher. She accused a student of stealing something that the aide had put away. This was a class that contained some pretty rough students, including one suspended multiple times for fighting and some gang members. So naturally, the sub decided to go after a sweet petite girl who had never caused trouble and was generally popular with her classmates. This set off the entire class, which is when the sub went ballistic and started throwing wild accusations and yelling at said students. Security eventually got called and took several students out. My first clue was when the sub got my cell phone number from the staff directory and went off for 20 or more minutes about how bad my students had been. This was followed up with an extremely long email and a 2-page written note on my desk, plus a concerned note from the admin about not having appropriate sub plans. She didn't follow them in the first place and decided to throw me under the bus. The next morning when I arrived at school, the students were waiting for me at the door. Once I got them calmed down enough to tell their side of the story, we had a discussion on how they could have handled the situation differently. I promised them to never get that sub again. On a related note, I had a good relationship with the said rough children because I treated them with respect and fairness. They usually behaved for me. As a side note, it's insane how easy it is to get even the most crazy of individuals like a normal human if you just treat them with a bit of decency and respect. I was homeless for a while, but I had this sort of immunity to getting targeted by bullies because 1, I was friends with everyone, and 2, if I had something, I shared it. So there was no point in wondering if I was hiding something, because I really wasn't. They left my perfectly prepped and neat desk in an absolute disaster. They didn't follow the lesson plan, and they took my gel pens. I had a sub steal my dry erase markers and emergency chocolate once. After that, I locked my drawers and left them with 2 pens and 1 dry erase marker. Today I learned how many people don't know what emergency chocolate is. It can be for you, your work friends, or in my case, occasionally also for students who are having a tough day and might be cheered up a little by some chocolate. It builds goodwill. Go and get yourself some. Make sure it's the good stuff. The mixed bag of individually wrapped Ghirardelli squares is my recommendation. It's a small portion, and just one of those feels like a treat. This happened to my colleague, but I was in the classroom next door. My colleague was showing Clash of the Titans at the end of the year, after a unit on ancient Greece. There's mild skin exposure at the beginning and the end of the movie as well, but they were in the middle of the movie, so there shouldn't have been an issue, right? Well, he left the video paused at the right spot. We still had VCRs like 10 years ago when this happened, but the sub somehow managed to show both the undressed individuals at the beginning and the end of the movie. Those scenes were hours apart and the class was only 40 minutes. Then the sub wrote an email to the principal about how my colleague made him show those scenes. I actually had a similar incident with a sub in the Clash of the Titans movie, though I was a student at the time. Apparently, our substitute didn't know that there would be tasteful skin exposure in the film, so when the undressed from the waist-up woman feeding her child popped up on screen, she sprinted to the front of the classroom to try and physically cover the TV with her body. Classic Catholic school. Didn't do anything to the kids per se, but told them that the reason I was out was because my mum was having chest cancer surgery. I teach K5, and I specifically didn't tell the kids because I didn't want them to worry. So when I came back, I had a bunch of kids coming up to me asking about my mum, which was so sweet, but not something that kindergarteners should have had to worry about. They rearranged my room, not in a moved a student A away from student B and put her by student C way, in a move the giant rug over to the opposite corner of the room and completely change the layout of the student desks and rearrange a bookshelf way. They lost more than half of my textbooks that I'd purchased myself, as well as textbooks that were school property. Administration just shrugged at this, until they found out the textbooks belonging to the school were around $120 each. They also lost all of the book assignments of 4 classes I asked them to collect so that I could correct those at home. It kinda sucked for the students who did put in a lot of work on them and didn't have digital copies. Also didn't teach anything that I asked him to because he didn't really like the subject matter. Also didn't bother grading. When I checked the grades he'd given out, there was only 1 grade and everyone was given 8 out of 10, even the students that weren't present in class. How do you manage to lose a bunch of textbooks from a classroom? I think you mean more like left with them in his bag. I've known a guy to do this as a substitute. He bragged about it on Facebook that he left with 30 textbooks that would have cost him £65 each. I reminded him while CCing in the school and the local police that what he did was theft, and he's no longer a teacher. She let the kids run wild and do whatever they wanted. They were first graders. I was out because my dad had died. Thank God my team realized what had happened, and everyone pulled together and cleaned the room and put it back together before I returned to work. The sub made the handicapped kid who has muscle, joint, and vision complications go grab his textbook from his homeroom. He's not completely helpless, but when it comes to heavy things, he does need help. His homeroom was halfway across campus, and the required book consisted of 5 large text volumes because they're specifically made for his poor vision. He can't wear glasses either due to complications. One of the kids offered to help because they're usually the one that goes and grabs it for him during normal class, but the sub yelled at him, saying he knows they're kind, and thought that they were just trying to get out of class. The sub told the kid he's not there to play games and for the kid to quit it before he sends him off to the principal's office. Needless to say, the entire class was shocked. Classmate came back with another student from the homeroom requesting that next time the sub send someone else to grab the books because my classmate can't carry it by himself. When my usual teacher came back, we requested the sub not return because of what he said to us and did to that classmate. My teacher wrote an email to the principal about it, and that was the end of that. Well, in fairness to this admittedly pretty crazy sub, making up false duties and stating non-existent reasons to leave class are something that a lot of students do when they have a substitute. But yeah, they could have maybe checked around a bit to find out more, and their threats were way over the top. I'll also mention that we've exhausted most of the answers that we've had from actual teachers, so there will be a lot of student witness accounts going forward. In 9th grade, my Algebra 1 teacher had her baby early in the year, so she was gone till the last month or 2 of the school year. The sub was a former teacher, so you'd think she'd be a great sub. Nope. She hyper-focused on 3 or 4 out of the 28 students in class and just taught them while completely ignoring the rest of us. She'd pass out a worksheet, then go to her chosen few and never acknowledged us again until she dismissed us. Never checked homework, never even acknowledged us. If anyone outside of her favorite students raised their hands or spoke up, they were ignored. Which went about as well as you'd expect with a bunch of 14 or 15-year-olds. That class was just wild. The kids who actually stayed in the classroom anyway. It was the Wild West in there. I'm actually surprised we weren't reported or visited by teachers on the other side of us for how loud we were. After several months with this lady, the vice principal was walking around, randomly checking classrooms, and walked into our absolute crap show Algebra 1 class. He lost it. He yelled at us all to sit down and shut up, which she also didn't acknowledge, by the way. He demanded she leave and sat with us the rest of the period. We never saw her again and had maybe 6 or 7 different subs after her. 2 weeks after this, our regular teacher came back, and when she realized we'd learned nothing and the extent of how useless this lady had been, she started tearing up. I passed the classroom on the way to the bathroom during the next period, and I saw her sobbing at her desk. A friend of my mum's worked at the central office where they assigned or organized the substitute teachers, and that lady was permanently taken off the sub list. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. We had a substitute teacher in my high school French class show a movie that was straight-up softcore pornography, but tried to explain that since it was French, it was artistic. It was equally frustrating because while I wanted to see undressed women, I also couldn't stop reading the subtitles because I had to understand what they were saying. That teacher did not come back the next day. Every time my 8th grade history teacher was out, Mrs. Hostess would usually sub for him. Not sure why, because she subbed other classes too. But all of the incidents of note happened when she subbed for history. One, there happened to be a girl in the class who shared a name with an Irish folk song, and every time Mrs. Hostess took attendance, when she got to folk song girl, she sang the whole song. The whole thing. Every time. And two, the history teacher kept candy and snacks in his desk. Lollipops that he'd hand out for correct answers or just because some leftover Halloween candy. And then there was the Twinkie. The Twinkie was not an ordinary Twinkie. That Twinkie was an experiment in processed food. This Twinkie was still in its original individual packaging and looked normal at first glance, but it was actually 3 years past expiration and rock solid. The history teacher demonstrated this by standing on said Twinkie during one of the first weeks of classes. All said to say, this is a thoroughly inedible Twinkie. It could be used in construction. So Mrs. Hostess subbed again, and we knew that she had discovered the lollipop stash because she was just openly eating them during class. But it wasn't until the next day that our history teacher opened his desk drawer to find out that the Twinkie was gone. This woman ate an expired, solid Twinkie as well as literally all the food and candy in the teacher's desk. Ugh. When I was back in the 4th grade, our teacher had a baby and was gone several weeks. The sub we had was an absolute witch. She had no patience for children, she'd yell at us for stupid stuff, ask us questions or give us homework that was way above our tiny little 4th grade brains, and then complain and call us stupid when literally none of the kids did well on said work. One girl decided to get smart with her one day, and the lady walks over and slaps the girl hard across the face, which of course sends the girl into a hysterical sobbing fit and says, "That's what your working girl of a mother should be doing more often." Being tiny, adorable 4th graders, we were all too afraid to tell anyone. We had to deal with that for 3 more weeks until the main teacher came back. I don't think kids these days would be silent about this. Back when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, we knew our parents would assume we were lying or deserved it and side with the teachers. But these days there's a much stronger culture of kids knowing their rights and that adults can't touch them. A few of the periods I taught were co-teach classes where a percentage of the students in the class had special needs, but could work well enough in the general population classroom with assistance from a special education co-instructor. These classes were often very rewarding to teach, but one downside of teaching that population from a logistical standpoint is that I was often required to attend ARD meetings. Basically, every special ed student has a meeting about twice a year, sometimes more frequently depending on need, where administrators, teachers, counselors, parents and guardians and the student themselves all get together to go over their status and review the various educational accommodations the student is receiving to determine what may or may not need to change to best suit their needs. I didn't have a problem with attending these meetings per se, but because they only take one period, and several teachers are rotating through various meetings over the course of the day, the school had devoted ARD subs who were more akin to babysitters than actual substitute educators. That means that during one period, heck can randomly break loose. One year, I had a tough student who had some serious attitude problems, but was a good person underneath it all, and with whom I'd done a lot of work to improve her engagement and interest in my class. About halfway through the year, I got called for an ARD meeting during a period I had with said student. In my absence of 45 minutes, the sub decided to pick a petty argument with my kid, who was rightfully offended but unwisely overreacted and escalated things to making threats and nearly coming to blows with the sub to where she ended up with in-school suspension for a while. Getting the story from all parties and witnesses involved later, it's pretty clear the sub was to blame, and the kid who I'd worked so hard with was back at square one. I eventually got her back on track, and she ended up with one of the highest grades in my class at the end of the year, but I could only imagine how much better she could have been without the setback and the amount of lost trust she had in adults. Back when I was a student, I had a sub decide my plans weren't good enough for her and went rogue. She decided to show my students videos of animals giving birth on YouTube. I taught English. On the one hand, that is truly screwed up. I think the only time that would be tangentially useful would be in a higher education veterinarian class of some sort, right? But on the other hand, I really want to hear the justification this lady gave when she was questioned about her educational decisions. Well, I'm a little late to the party, but here goes. I had a grade 1/2 class last year, and one student had diabetes. Let's call him Adam. So Adam had a cell phone that beeps when his blood sugar is too low or too high. It's connected to the monitor in his arm or hip. The cell phone has no other uses, no apps, no data. It's not connected to the school Wi-Fi. The substitute, of course, saw his phone on his desk and promptly took it away as per the no devices rule. During gym class, an educational assistant, or EA, comes in to make sure everything is okay, and Adam is visibly ill. Pale and sweating, the whole works. Luckily, this EA knows Adam's medical plan and instantly asks Adam for the phone, and he explains that the sub took it away in the morning. The EA then loses it on the substitute, demanding the phone. The substitute calls in the principal to reprimand the EA, and then gets reprimanded herself, as obviously she didn't read the student's safety plans. She was asked to leave, and the principal taught the class the rest of the day. Adam was fine, drank a couple of juice boxes and had a granola bar. His mum picked him up shortly after. Two things come to mind. There was the one who told the black children they need to speak more clearly because people think black people are hard to understand. Then there was the one just sitting and playing on their phone while the class lost its mind. I'd left out eggs overnight that I was going to use in a science experiment the following day. I was out and thought nothing about it. I returned the following day and went looking for the eggs, only to find them missing. I asked a student where they'd gone, and I was informed that the substitute took the class to the special education kitchen, hard-boiled them, and then ate them. I went to talk to my AP and was informed that the sub had called in sick for her job for that day due to food poisoning. I had a cool Chinese lucky cat that went missing after I had a sub. My students said the sub seemed really intrigued by it, talked about it several times, and even moved it from the shelf where it sat and brought it over to my desk. And it was gone when I returned the next day. I had a sub who somehow allowed a last period class of freshmen to convince them that they weren't supposed to be working on the packet that I left for class, and which every other class that day had been working on. Reason given was because they had, quote, already finished it, and told him they were supposed to be watching a movie. So he went to the library to get the movie, leaving the class unattended, which promptly then broke out into a dance party involving dancing on the desks. My department's chair classroom was next door, but as she taught AP government to seniors, she was able to leave them to come next door and try to figure out what the heck that noise was. No sub in the room. She calmed the class down and got them back into the seats and into the worksheets, called the principal, who met the sub on his way back from the library, and told him he could go home. My chair also found it would be appropriate to basically call me and blame me for this while I was sick at home. I don't teach anymore. I mean, packets weren't a great emergency sub-plan, but what can you do? They could have played Heads Up 7-Up for all I cared. They were a handful of a group on the best of days. Freshmen after lunch during last period of the day are a situation. I vividly remember one incident of having a substitute in my kindergarten. I had an infected cut on my toe and had been prescribed an antibiotic. That morning was the first time I took it. We were sitting on the floor for roll call, and I remember this burning pain in my abdomen, and she told us to get up and go out to our desks. I tried to get up only to realize I couldn't move and just laid back. The sub was a total cow, and I remember she was always really mean. Anyway, she starts yelling at me for being attention-seeking and basically tries to pull me up. I'm in so much pain that I start screaming, and one of the teachers from the classroom next to ours comes, realizes I'm definitely not faking it, and calls an ambulance. Long story short, I'm horribly allergic to penicillin and my kidneys were failing. I was in hospital for almost a week before I got discharged. Needless to say, that absolute witch was not allowed back at the school, but I'll never forget that day. We had a sub for our science class. She didn't believe in science, but pseudosciences instead, and was sexist to males. Because of her weird diet, she'd rip loud, sulfur-smelling toots all the time. Then she'd get mad if we brought it up, despite being fed new age hippie bullcrap and being crop dusted. She was also a horrible life skills teacher because she said women can choose when to have periods without birth control. I participate in STEM programs a lot. In the 90s, I belonged to a club that refurbished old industrial PCs and donated them to schools. Sometimes we'd get completely burned out motherboards or disk drives, so I took a bunch of those and made displays showing the insides of computers, and I'd let the kids explore them as part of my session. Then I'd dig out a couple of blown PCs and monitors, hand out the screwdrivers and let them rip them apart. Yes, I was always careful around the old tube monitors. Once they were done, I'd let them pick apart if they wanted to take it home. The younger kids especially loved this, and frequently I'd see some kids take home a hard drive controller or a graphics card like it was a real treasure. I even made the local news with my program. That's the thing about living in a small city. Eventually everyone makes the news. So one day I went to do my lesson at a high school, I think freshman or sophomore science class, and the class had a substitute and I had an appointment right after that session. So I told them I'd come back to pick up everything the next day. The kids could take whatever they wanted from the old PCs, but please put my displays aside in the cupboard. Next day I came by and all of my displays were still out and they were completely trashed. Worse yet, the sub's attitude was, well, kids will be kids. That was the last session I did ever for that program. What's the most bullcrap-sounding alibi a cop got that actually turned out to be true? Cop here got a call of a domestic dispute that sounded very heated and a lot of banging was heard. Get to the scene and I can hear someone yelling and swearing and brawling. It does not sound good at all. Guy answers the door, shirt off and angry, but seems bewildered as to why the police have been called. He told me he was building IKEA furniture. That sounded like the most bullcrap thing ever. But we enter and see that there's new IKEA furniture half set up and no one else is home. Color me surprised. And no, I didn't help assemble the furniture. No one should assemble IKEA stuff while armed. I was driving with my fiancé and we went through a roadblock where they checked registration and oh crap. We get to the cops and they ask for ours. I'm sitting in the passenger seat. I open up the glove box and right there is a clear, unmarked baggie filled to the brim with catnip. I completely forgot that it was there and I just froze. Wide-eyed, I turned to look at the cop shining his light through my open window, and he's frozen too, just staring at this baggie with this look on his face like, really? I just started immediately professing, oh my god, I swear to god this is catnip, you can take it and smell it or test it or whatever, like I swear. And at this point it's just so ridiculous that I start cracking up. And the cop takes it and reasonably deduces that I'm telling the truth, and he starts laughing and calls his partner over and tells her what happened, and they both just cackled away for a minute and sent us on our way. During a search of a person, I pulled out a bag of sticky dark substance consistent with smack. The subject had multiple substance priors and is a known heavy smack user. He immediately tells us it's burnt sugar and he's angry someone sold it to him. Long story short, when I tested the substance, it did not test positive. Former Maliciouscompliance here, look it up, it's a Dutch thing. Police, but also kinda military. We also had jurisdiction over the American soldiers stationed here. One day we got called over to a possible domestic dispute. We arrived at the house and the guy opened wearing only underwear. He told us he and his wife were role-playing. Of course, we didn't trust this and we asked to see his wife. After denying us entry, we told him we'd come back with a warrant. He reluctantly agreed to let us enter. So we go in and he opened the basement door and inside was the freakiest dungeon, man. I mean chains, whip things I couldn't identify hanging on the walls, and then in the middle, hanging in the chains, was his undressed, prepared wife. We asked her, but she told us everything was okay. It turned out they were really into some stuff. Asked them to keep the screaming part in the basement and to a minimal. We did the whole thing with a straight face, but man, as soon as we were in the car… This cannot be the only time this has happened. I'm willing to stake my savings account on it. It's probably not even the only account of it in this video, although that I won't bet money on. I got pulled over for driving to school at 10 a.m. The cop wanted to know why I was skipping school. I explained that our little town girls basketball team just won state, and since the game was so far away, they'd let us start that day at 10:30 a.m. He followed me all the way to the school so he could ask the principal. I still don't know what was illegal about driving to school at 10 a.m., but he was kind of a D-bag. You know what? I'll throw my hat into the ring as a defense attorney. A guy got pulled over for impaired driving and got charged later with a DUI. My boss gets the criminal complaint and the guy shows up for his initial appearance and tells her he hadn't been drinking despite horrifically failing the sobriety test. The last part of that test is a breathalyzer, which he refused. Refusal is an automatic failure in and of itself, without failing the nystagmus or follow the finger test, the walk, the leg lift, My boss is literally sitting next to him and he's obviously wasted again, disappointing but not uncommon for alcoholics. The deputies arrest him for bail jumping because he drove himself to court that day, and while out on bail he's not supposed to drink. He adamantly denies drinking. The blood tests come back. He didn't drink. The guy's diabetic without knowing it, and naturally got himself drunk because sometimes when it goes untreated, diabetes can cause symptoms that look just like intoxication. We got him some insulin and the charge is dismissed. Okay, so I'm going to tell my story as the person behind the wheel. My uncle was divorcing his terrible wife. He was no saint himself, but definitely on the right side of their divorce. The wife was still on the paperwork to take their 2 kids out of the school, even though my uncle had temporary custody while the courts did their thing. She had previously threatened to take them both and just run away, so I don't know why she was still on the paperwork. On picture day that year, she showed up to the school and signed both of the kids out and disappeared. I was not involved in the crazy process of calling the cops and tracking the kids down, but I was pulled from school that day because I had my driver's license and could be an extra pair of hands. They managed to find the kids and they were turned over to my grandmother and mum, but my cousin was distraught that she'd be missing picture day. It was her first time away from her terrible mother and she was finally allowed to be a cheerleader, which was a dream in her tiny eyes. So, me having my car and nothing else better to do, I offered to take her back to the school. My mum got the school to agree and to keep the person there a little longer, but it was going to be by the skin of our teeth that we'd make it as this was rural Oklahoma. We got in the car and I blasted down those dirt roads doing approximately 70 in a 35 zone. Not a good decision on my part, but I was an anxiety-ridden 17-year-old dealing with nasty divorce and kidnapping for the first time in my life. We, of course, get pulled over. I'm freaking out because I can't afford that bad of a ticket, not to mention all the other crap happening in my life that day. The cop listened to the story and ignored my barely held-in tears and said he'd let us off with a warning because he believed the story. And the only reason he believed the story was that he'd just pulled over my uncle going the same speed in the opposite direction on the same road and got the same story from him. I heard a wild alibi told to a cop in my capacity as an EMS. Go to a woman who's been attacked by her cat. Her injuries were crazy. Covered in blood, her scalp is literally shredded, huge lacerations and stuff, and I know cats are known to do some damage, but the story just wasn't fitting and she was so sketchy about anyone going in her house. Adamantly refuses to let anyone inside because she thinks they're going to take away her cat. He didn't mean to, he was just excited by the birds. Her cat was a lynx. Oh, I was the one with the excuse. I forgot my keys at a friend's place before going out drinking that night. Got home at 2 a.m, there are no keys. Only one of our windows didn't have ghetto bars, so I took the screen out and started pushing and smacking it up. The locks were on the sides, only providing friction. As I'm halfway in, I just feel whoomp. I got tackled into the house, and the officer was still outside, holding onto my ankles. I look up and just say, "I'm astonished by your response time. I actually live here. Let me get up, unlock the door, and give you my ID." So I did. He stares at it for a second, then says, "Sorry," and sprints off to look for the person they were actually in the area looking for. My dad is an officer, and he pulled over a woman for speeding and running a red light, and she said her chest implant burst. He called EMS to rush them to the hospital, and turned out it did. It's actually very dangerous if they leak. Family friend was a cop. Pulled a guy over who was speeding profusely. The guy was obviously disheveled. He said he was headed to the hospital because he had a tick on his member. The cop was confused, but he escorted him there, then waited in the lobby to check on him and see if he was blowing smoke. After a while, he asked the desk what was going on and why it took so long to take a tick off a man's eggplant. Her reply was, "It wasn't on it, it was in it." My dad was a cop, and my favorite story of his goes like this. He's a young cop in a rough neighborhood. It's so late that the stoplights are flashing red, meaning to treat it like a stop sign. Out of nowhere, this pink caddy goes rolling through the intersection. My dad pulls him over. A big black guy was driving. The caddy had a fur interior and dice in the mirror. A real pimp car, if you know what I mean. My dad goes, "Sir, do you know you ran that light back there?" And the guy says, "Officer, I do believe I got between the flashes." My dad was laughing so hard he had to let the guy go. I had a run-in with a cop that was really funny once. When I was 18, I was on a double date with a friend, and we stepped out of a restaurant to smoke. A cop came up and started hounding us, telling us that there had been break-ins into cars in the area. Eventually, he said he needed to pat us down, and he pulled a brown paper bag out of my friend's pocket. He got a smug look on his face and asked, "So, what's in here, huh?" And my friend said, the Emancipation Proclamation, with a completely straight face. The cop opened the bag and pulled out a small booklet, got embarrassed, and let us go. My friend had been to the Lincoln Museum earlier that day and did actually have a small copy of the Emancipation Proclamation in his pocket. Former cop here, I was behind a vehicle that couldn't stay in the lane and kept swerving and stuff. It was 1 a.m. and I think there was another drunk idiot on the road. I pull him over, the guy is a straight-up butthole to me. Cursed me out, yelling at me, and I noticed his speech is kinda slurred. I get him out to the car, and I can smell a fruity smell on his breath, and he has to lean against the car for support. I ask him how much he's had to drink, and he tells me to F off. By this point, I'm ready to bring him in for a DUI. But I just had a feeling something wasn't right. I called emergency medical services to come and check him. Blood sugar was at 40. Not drunk, just diabetic. If I would have arrested him, he probably would have died before I finished the paperwork. Go with your gut if something doesn't seem right. Huh, if I had a nickel for every time I'd heard of a DUI being diabetic and not drunk, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it is weird that it happened twice. In high school, some of my buddies sold green herb, driving around in a car with a scale, baggies, and 2 to 4 ounces at any given time. One day, Tony and Eric decided to go to a really good taco stand for lunch in between deliveries. Eric is driving, they're making their way downtown when he starts laughing. He says, "Did you see that?" Tony says, "No, what?" "I'll turn around, you've got to see this." "Dude, don't get us pulled over, what the frick, chill." Eric makes a U-turn and turns down a street. Nothing there, so he stops in front of a random house to look around. Tony is perplexed. What the frick was it? Just drive. I saw a dude pushing a stroller with 2 wiener dogs in it. Tony says, "You're retarded." As soon as Eric starts driving again, a cop car pulls up behind them and lights them up. He walks up to the door. "What are you guys doing?" Eric is panicking a bit and says, "I saw a guy pushing a stroller with wiener dogs in it and I had to show my friend." "How come you're parked in front of this known trap house and your car smells like dope?" Silence from Tony, and Eric says, "There was this guy with a stroller." "Get out of the car," says the cop. The car gets searched and they find all of this crap. As they're getting loaded into the back of the cop car, all handcuffed up, Cop 2 just stops. "Hey, look at that." The other cop, "Oh, wow, no crap." Everyone looks at this old guy pushing a stroller with his 2 wiener dogs poking their heads out. The cops burst out laughing. They both got charged with possession and trafficking, though. And since I've never met anyone who didn't love this story about Eric, here's another one for ya. A while before the infamous wiener dog incident, he had to get new tires for his car. Bought it into a local tire shop and left it there for the day. Being the brilliant kid that he was, he left his stash in his favorite hiding spot, thinking that nobody would ever find it. The hiding spot was in his spare tire compartment, under the carpet in the hatchback and trunk area. The guy changing his tires was courteous enough to make sure his spare had the manufacturer-recommended amount of air pressure in it. He also helped himself to an ounce of high-quality bud while he was in there. Eric was angry. He told us about it while we were blazing that night. We all laughed, we thought it was great. He didn't. He strutted into that tire shop the next day and demanded to speak with the manager. He told him that his employee stole something from the back of his car and he wanted it back. When he refused to tell the manager what was stolen, the manager basically told him he couldn't do anything if he didn't know what it was and suggested he call the cops if he wanted to escalate things. Eric did not call the cops. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had a run-in with the Fuzz a few years ago and I wonder exactly what they thought when they first stopped me. I'd taken a cab back from a work party and I was pretty drunk. My friend and I had just moved to this new apartment, so I accidentally gave the cab driver the wrong address. I ended up on a block that looked very similar to mine and a building that looked like mine. There were 2 doors before getting into my apartment door, which was on the first floor. Like my apartment building, they left the first door unlocked and locked the second door. I kept trying my keys to open it, but I couldn't and I was confused. I went outside to look for my car and it wasn't parked there. That's when I realized I was on the wrong block. I started walking in the direction I thought my apartment was when a cop car pulls up. They ask me what I'm doing and I tell them, "I'm really drunk and I just want to go home," which was the honest truth. They told me they got a call about someone trying to get into an apartment building. I guess the people in that building woke up and thought I was trying to break in. They were super suspicious of me at first, but eventually it became clear I was just some drunk idiot and not a burglar. They ran me through, to make sure I didn't have any warrants or anything, and when I checked out, they offered me a ride home. The ride back was hilarious because when we were getting to my apartment, I tried telling them that it was a bit complicated to get to because of all the one-way streets. The officer driving was like, "Who do you think you're with?" and then turned on the lights and went the wrong way down the street to get me home fast. It honestly felt like I was with the two cops from Superbad. My 4th grade teacher went to a cousin's wedding in mid-July. The cousin had overestimated how much champagne they'd need at the reception and was giving away bottles to anyone who was interested. So my teacher took 3 and put them in the backseat of her car. Again, this was in a hot summer day in July. After saying their goodbyes, my teacher, her husband, and her parent piled into the car and pulled out onto the highway, where 2 of the bottles burst open, spraying champagne everywhere and causing quite a ruckus. Of course, while this was happening, the car was swerving as the driver was also getting bathed in sparkling champagne. So it came as no surprise that as soon as they collected themselves, they saw the familiar flashing lights of a state trooper and pulled over. According to my teacher, the first thing the cop said was, "I'm not going to ask if you've been drinking because I can smell it from here." My teacher tried explaining what had happened, but the cop wouldn't hear of it and ordered everybody out of the car. That's when the cops saw that everyone, both drivers and passengers, were dressed in their finery, but soaked with champagne and looking quite shaken. A cursory search showed the open bottles, but the cop still insisted on a quick sobriety test just to make sure. I kinda have to wonder if the alcoholic fumes no doubt pouring off all of the drenched people would have affected the results of a breathalyzer test, but then again it seems like there was a fair body of visual proof, so maybe he'd give you the benefit of the doubt. My first ever real call was for a flasher at the local park. When I got there and finally found him, it was a mentally impaired young man, aged 16 or 17, who had a pair of headphones on going full Donald Duck. I said, "Hey man, come here. What the hell is going on? You know you have to keep your pants on, especially at the park." He goes on to tell me he had a bad itching down his pants and couldn't take it anymore, so he had to rip them off and was running home to get help. I said, "Come on, you couldn't make it home first?" And he said no, he had ants in his pants. As sure as crap, according to more than one witness's account, he had been sitting in a sandbox playing at the park and accidentally on a nest of red ants that had crawled up his trouser legs. I'm not a cop, but once I got pulled over by a fire truck. It was Orlando in August 1990. It was close to 100 degrees outside. I worked for a computer rental company. We'd rent computers to companies in town for trade shows, or for a lot of other situations. The company van was a ragged-out Chrysler minivan with 180,000 miles on it. The AC didn't work, so the windows were down. I was coming back to the office in heavy rush-hour traffic, and I found myself in a right-turn-only lane and couldn't get out in time. So, I was forced to make the right turn. I hit the gas to speed up and get in front of the people making a left turn into my same direction. I had to get all the way over to the left side to make a U-turn. So I cut off a fire truck to do it. One of the big squarish fire trucks with the flat front. I cut them off and got in the left lane to wait for the green arrow. I looked out the window to my left and saw a Dixie chopper lawnmower mowing the grass on the side of the road maybe 15 feet from me. It was already hot, but this tremendous wave of heat came through the driver's side window. I thought, man, that's a hot lawnmower. The light turned green and I started my U-turn. Halfway through it, this cloud of, I thought, steam came out of the hood and covered the windshield so I couldn't see. The power steering also failed. So I fought the car, trying to get back to the gas station at the corner so I could find a payphone. And yes, that is how old I am. Because I couldn't see, I missed the turn and ended up turning into an apartment complex. About this time, the cloud stopped and I could see again. Still no power steering. So I fought the car to do a U-turn so I could get back to the gas station. At this point, the fire truck I'd cut off turned into the apartment complex, full lights, and blocked me in. 2 huge firefighters got out of the truck holding fire extinguishers like beer cans. "Excuse me, sir, did you know your van was on fire?" Turns out, while I was cutting them off, I'd been shooting flames out from under the passenger side of the van. They hit the lights, did a U-turn, and came back to me. The wave of heat wasn't from the lawnmower. They checked out the van and let me go. The cause turned out to be a damaged power steering line. It sprayed power steering fluid all over the exhaust manifold and caught fire. In short, cut off a fire truck while on fire. Got pulled over by said fire truck. Former park ranger. First week of the job, we pulled up and saw a couple of kids smoking in their cars with the windows down. The city has ordinance against smoking on park property, but it's too petty to just give them a ticket. We approach the car and they're visibly nervous. My field training officer, or FTO, looks through the windows and sees a couple of beer cans in the car. Bingo. We get them out and start running their info. They're all underage, but old enough to smoke cigs. My FTO asks them where the beer came from, and the driver says he recycles. FTO laughs and begins to search the car. I'm finishing up running their info, and these guys are being really respectful. The FTO finishes searching the cab and goes to open the trunk. All of a sudden, I hear him burst out laughing. He's laughing so hard that he can barely breathe. He waves me over to look at the trunk of the car, and it's level with crushed cans and bottles. My FTO said that it had heard that excuse for 20-year-olds before, and this was the first time it was true. He walked up, uncuffed the driver, and let him go. I did get stopped once for eating a taco. I worked at a community college in LA that had a high school right next to it. Well, there was a lot of substances sold through the fence at that high school, so there were always cops driving up and down the street between the schools. Couldn't get a parking pass since I just worked at that school, so I always parked on the street. I hit up Taco Bell for lunch and was sitting in my car eating my double-decker tacos when a cop car drove past. Next thing I know, he's flipping a U-turn and heading straight for me. He slides to a stop, driver window to driver window, and yells, "What the heck do you think you're doing?" Stunned, I just said, "Eating my lunch." Well, he isn't buying it and says I'm hiding something. I just hold up my taco and look so confused. He burst out laughing and peeled out. I saw him a few times after that, and he always waved and had the biggest grin on his face. I had a smack addict who I arrested for a warrant. While searching her purse, I found a small container with a grayish-brown substance in it, consistent with smack. When I asked her what it was, she started laughing. She told me to test it because it wasn't smack. I tested it, and sure enough, the test came back negative. She explained to me that inside the container were the ashes of her dead cat. She said that when she goes to pick up smack for her friends, she'll take some for herself and cut the rest with her cat's ashes. Her friends have been snorting or shooting up some of her dead cat. We got a call for a kid. He was 18 and a gang member. Apparently he was brandishing a firearm. He had pulled up his shirt pretending to brandish said weapon to intimidate somebody. The person calling only saw a holster. After we got there, he kept telling us it wasn't a gat, but an adult toy. We took him down at weapon point, and he was right. He was walking around with a holstered black marital aid. Why? Because he could. Which celebrity did you meet before they were famous, and how did they act back then? I went to high school with Sandra Oh. She was funny, dynamic, smart, outgoing, and very into drama. In one school play, she played what I will call a sort of mime character. She didn't have lines, but was still a big part of the action, commenting on what was going on stage through her actions. Anyhow, in one scene, as she was exiting the stage, she banged her head on one of the props. You could hear the loud bang, but she was a pro and just carried on. It's been great to see her have such success, and I love that she's kept in touch with her close friends from high school. You can spot them at awards shows sometimes. My grandpa, rest in peace, owned a grocery store in Miami in the late 70s. Wesley Snipes and his friends once stole some candy from his store, and when he caught them, he let them have it. Since then, Wesley and his friends were regulars. Once Wesley left his bike in front of the store and it got stolen. It was a pretty bad area. My grandpa gave him his old bike that he kept in the back of the store. My uncle took over in 2001 when my grandpa died. In 2007, he came back to the store while my uncle and cousin were there to ask about my grandpa. My uncle said they talked for a little over an hour about how my grandpa treated him like a son. When he found out my grandpa had passed, he felt guilty he didn't visit sooner. He embraced my uncle and cousin and left. My uncle said he told them that they plan on having the building repainted while they talked. About a week later, a crew of painters arrived and told my uncle they were already paid to have the building repainted. Such a genuine dude. Even though he's often portrayed negatively, I'll remember the nice gestures he continued to make our way even after he had made it. Work in a restaurant about 15 years ago as a manager. Rachel McAdams walked in for an interview. She was still in acting school and serving tables to pay for it. She worked at my restaurant over the course of the next 2 summers, serving on our patio. We're still friends to this day. She hasn't changed one bit. Still bikes to get groceries. This is real late and secondhand, but I knew someone who went to ACM with Ed Sheeran. He said he was lazy in class, skipped classes, and just wanted to smoke green herb. And my acquaintance was mad when Ed started getting more and more famous when Ed didn't even bother with his music courses. I thought it was funny. I went to the same high school as Chris D'Elia. He was a dork, but still arrogant. He worked on the yearbook and gave himself like 3 or 4 pages so he could write his fatuous observations and pretend it was comedy. So that hasn't changed. But in other ways, I guess he has changed. He never did the deed with high schoolers back then. Well, I've never heard of this guy, but from the context we're getting here, it seems like he must have been cancelled for being a pretty sleazy guy. And I should probably say that there's going to be a lot of people here that I've probably never heard of, but I'll use them in case any of you have. That said, here's a story that to me is as funny as it is surprising. My starving actor friend is livid whenever you bring up the Hulk himself, Mr. Mark Ruffalo. Out of all the theatre students in their clique, he was the least serious about acting. He was a skateboarder and just got into acting because his friends were doing it. My friend is annoyed that Ruffalo's become famous and the one getting to make movies with hot actresses, while the others are, at best, doing local murder mystery events. My aunt used to work with Gordon Ramsay's mother, but never made the connection. Once they were out for lunch and he ended up coming in to see his mum and met my aunt in the process. She said he was so lovely and polite. Plus my dad has a bunch of Gordon's old jumpers he didn't want anymore. Not signed or anything like that, it's just a fun family story now. I went to college with Joe Keery, aka Steve Harrington in Stranger Things. He was my college boyfriend's sweet mate and just the nicest guy. His hair has always been dreamy and amazing. Last time I saw him was at a viewing of The Hateful Eight after we graduated, and he still made a point to come over and say hi. Friend of mine was friends with Tom Hanks in high school and went to prom with him. He still writes her personalized birthday cards on one of his typewriters. I went to junior high with Nora Jones. She was the most sincere and serene person. She was fun to talk to, and she never gave a hint of who her father was. The night she won all of those Grammys was very telling that she hadn't changed a bit. I went to high school with Mark Ruffalo. He was nice. He was one of those thespians. Our high school had an acting group that challenged the students to get out of their shell and do things in front of strangers, like introducing yourself as the wild fairy of the woods and presenting them with a flower. We didn't talk much, but like I said, he seemed like a good guy. Went to middle school with Megan Fox for a bit. She rode my bus and mostly kept to herself. Most of the guys would fight over who was going to sit next to her, but she was very shy and didn't have much to say. I went to school with Rupert Grint, Ron Weasley from Harry Potter. I was into acting as well, so we'd done a few school plays together. He was really nice, very chill and a good laugh. I haven't seen him since the school days, but he kept coming to classes whenever he wasn't filming and was always happy to chat about the movies. Sometimes he'd need a little break from so many people wanting to talk, and he'd come and hang out in the library. And honestly, you'd never know he was in the biggest film series of all time. Honestly, I think a lot of these answers boil down to if they wanted fame or not. Rupert just loved what he was doing, and didn't care about being famous and having people kiss his butt. Just a nice, normal kid. He used to live in a town not too far from me. Everyone seemed to think he was a recluse and a bit of a moody prick. But I think, like you said, it can be tiring having people come up to you all the time, and he probably reasonably wanted some quiet for himself. A co-worker of mine met Daisy Ridley while on a backpacking trip. They got to know each other pretty well while traveling together. She told my co-worker that she wanted to become an actress. Looks like that panned out pretty well. They said Daisy was an absolutely lovely individual. I live in the town where Dolly Parton grew up, and practically everyone above the age of 50 who grew up here claims to either be some distant relative of Dolly's or they claim to know her in some way. Everyone has their story of the time they met her. It's pretty obvious, but regardless of who you talk to, Dolly has always been sweet and generous. But everything has simply grown exponentially due to her fame. Examples are the millions of books she gives out for free to children around the globe each month, or how she gave out 10 grand cash to many of my close friends after their houses burned in a fire a couple of years back. Thousands of people are employed here and work for the businesses she owns. It's a tad strange to see when you walk in, but the birthing center at the local hospital is funded by and named after her. I honestly can't think of one person I know who doesn't like her. Dolly's heart has only gotten bigger because of the fame. My father-in-law worked in a high-end business in Southern California in the 80s, and he ended up running straight into Dolly as he was rushing out of a swinging door at the same time she was walking in. As he says, she chest bumped me from 5 feet out. But as he was apologizing profusely, she cut him off and said, "It's okay, darling, but the next time you want to get physical, try buying me a drink first." Then she winked and started giggling as she went on her business. And him and his 2 co-workers who saw it happen have been smitten with her ever since. He met some other celebrities working there, but gosh darn, that's the one I'll always be jealous of. If anybody deserves to be America's sweetheart, it's Dolly. My dad went to school with Steve Irwin. Reckons he was exactly the same as a young fella. He'd be away from school all the time on trips with Bob to rescue and rehome crocs all over Australia. No good at footy, but you know. My mum dated Will Ferrell for a little while. He came round quite a lot, and she said he was really down to earth and incredibly funny. However, afterwards they just really lost touch. so we never got to know how he personally changed. My mum says he's still like he used to be. My mum and dad still laugh about her dating him. I went to high school with Dacre Montgomery. He was a jerk with a huge ego in high school, and I saw him recently when he came back to his hometown, and it seems like he's still a jerk with an even bigger ego now. I can't watch Stranger Things without rolling my eyes every time he comes on screen. Jack Black is the same person he was as a teenager. Funny, kind, caring, and spreading that joy of music. My grandfather taught Jack Nicholson in high school math class. He said he was rebellious but wasn't too bad at math. My mum used to ride the bus to work in downtown Cleveland with Steve Harvey's first wife. Apparently she supported him while he was trying to get his career started. Then, basically as soon as he got successful, he divorced her for a younger woman. My mum always hated him because she felt that he treated his first wife like crap, and has a repertoire of choice words she'll scream at the TV whenever he pops up. You know, I've never heard a story about Steve Harvey that makes him seem like even a slightly good person. I knew Brett and Jermaine from Flight of the Conchords back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I met Taika Waititi a few times too. I was a big fan of his art at the time, and there was one painting of someone in a bathtub that stuck in my head. I knew Brett better than the others because he was in a reggae band with my good friend Barnaby. As far as I can tell, they're all exactly the same. The narrator used to work in cafes in Wellington, New Zealand, and I swear the size of that place meant that you'd met fewer people who hadn't seen Brett and Jermaine on the street than who had. It always gave me a bit of a rush when it happened there, though. A friend of mine is buddies with Paul Rudd. Says he's exactly the same and a great human. Exactly the same because he hasn't aged at all in like 20 years? I knew Robert Pattinson about 15 years ago. Nice guy, friendly, a lot of fun to be with. He lived by himself in the centre of Soho, London, in a tiny one-bed flat that I think he felt like the romantic vision of a starving artist, or at least he wanted to. He had a weird side. He'd say random, violent, depraved things, and he was obsessed with Jack Nicholson. He never really gave an F. He had confidence, and he was always himself, and he knew he could be deliberately contradictory, and he used that as a personality trope. But he was a good enough guy, and I get the impression that he's very comfortable with himself now that he's developed his career, that he acts very well, and that he can pick and choose his roles based upon what he wants to do and who he wants to work with. Twilight for him was always a means to an end, and I think he worked it very much to his benefit, and he didn't compromise himself. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Bruno Mars's mum was a bartender at a local karaoke dive bar that I was a regular at. At the time, his biggest hit was the hook for Billionaire by Travie McCoy. Anyway, she was selling tickets for an upcoming concert he was having, and she asked our table if we wanted to buy some. My friend declined, and she exclaimed, "Why not? He's my son." I ended up getting a couple of tickets despite not knowing any of Bruno Mars's songs, and it turned out to be one of the best concerts I've ever been to. The guy knows how to put on a good live show. The tickets were only $40 each, I think. His opening act was a local group of large Polynesian men singing Motown, who went by the name Nesian 9, and they were pretty good too. The next time he was in town for a concert, he'd blown up and the tickets were going for $400. I would have loved to see him again, but not at that price. His mum was really nice, down to earth, and a pretty good singer herself. Rest in peace, Bernie. At least she lived long enough to see her son's success. My coworker's dad grew up with Queen Latifah in North Jersey. His whole family loves her because they were about to lose their house, so she paid that off for them. They've never said a bad thing about her. Queen Latifah, if this gets back to you, thanks for what you did for your friends in New Jersey. Phil's a really cool guy. My grandmother and mum were really good friends with George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley from Wham. They got invited to concerts and got to sit in special seats, stuff like that. And a few years ago, me and my family stayed with Andrew Ridgeley in his guest house in Cornwall for a weekend. But they seemed to me like they stayed really nice to my grandparents and mum, and Andrew Ridgeley was very kind to my family when we met him. My mum is friends with Johnny Knoxville's cousin, so she met Johnny once and had no idea who he was. She said he was nice and funny as heck. She didn't realize until years later she'd even met him until I showed her one of his movies. From what I gather, he's a normal dude and pretty hilarious. One of my aunts actually dated Bill Gates for a bit. I believe a few years before things took off for him. She said he was too into her or something like that at the time, and it weirded her out, I guess. Sorry about the lack of detail. My mum knew Mel B from her high school. Apparently she always copied other people's work. The comments have really got me thinking. There seem to be a lot of actual celebrities that stayed perceptually genuine after gaining fame. Meanwhile, now I personally know a few social media influencers who seem to talk down to anyone that can't afford to live in LA. I just find that so interesting. Keisha. Total nerd. 1600 on her SATs. Quiet, a bit of a social outcast. Nice though. You could tell she cared about others and wouldn't ever hurt a fly. My brother used to play basketball with a bunch of people in high school, and among those who'd sometimes join in was Pete Davidson. My brother said he got ripped on a ton and no one really liked him, but that might just be because he wasn't great at basketball. I met him last year while he was out with his friends. I didn't want to say anything till my mum rolled down the window and asked if I could get a picture with him. We were in a parking lot. He was on FaceTime with someone and told them he'd call back later, and he took a picture with me. Really nice guy. My 8th grade science teacher dated Bill Nye. Broke up with him because he didn't like kids. Hold up, my high school biology teacher dated Bill Nye too. Not sure why they didn't work out though. I find it hilarious that at least 2 of his exes became science teachers. I went to high school with Post Malone. Pre-Malone, I guess. We graduated the same year. He always wore a suit to class and was that nerdy, dedicated kid. I'm glad to see how his life turned out. I hoped nothing for the best for him, and now I listen to him all the time. I'm just a rando to him though, we never really talked. I went to high school with Emma Chamberlain. She was a huge bully in high school and pretty much a brat who thought she could get away with whatever she wanted, before she got famous. Her parents were divorced, which led to both of them always trying to be her friend and never actually parenting her, so they basically let her do whatever she wanted. When she said that people from her high school made fun of her because she was poor and that the parking lot was all BMWs and Range Rovers, I lost my mind because she was the bully in high school, and while the school definitely had some wealthy students, it was mostly a middle-class crowd. I knew Cillian Murphy back in secondary school. We didn't go to the same school, but we mingled a lot. He was a few years older than me. The guy was super quiet, but really friendly. I remember when he was cast in 28 Days Later, and people were pretty hyped for him, but a good few people didn't think much of it. Once it came out, though, a lot of people changed their tune when they could see him actually act amazingly. You know, him being quiet but interesting really tracks from the few interviews I've seen with him. Man, I can't wait to see 28 Years Later this year, even if the likelihood of that guy's character being alive and kicking in it is pretty much non-existent. We'll see. Jennifer Lawrence. I moved to Louisville middle of 7th grade. She was my first friend and the first person I had a sleepover with. We hit it right off. She was very different from me, a cheerleader, came from a lot of wealth, but her family was really awesome, and we were both kind of weird and outgoing, so we became good friends very fast. Her family owned a farm that had a children's summer camp, hi-ho, and we went to it a couple of times. She had one of her birthday parties there. I remember her kissing our friend John under a trampoline. We talked about that for way too long. We hung out fairly often until she moved to New York City a year and a half after we met. We started taking acting classes together in the 8th grade at a local theater here in town, Walden Theater. It's funny because on our first day, we had no idea we were both taking the class. I walked into the first one and there she was. We were both so excited to have a friend there. We were in the first level of the theater, but after a couple of weeks, both moved to the intermediate class. We were the oldest people in the class, so that's why they moved us up so fast. It had nothing to do with talent. We carpooled together to Walden Theater every Tuesday and Thursday for acting class. I'd ride the bus home with her mum would take us to class, then my mum would pick us up and take her home. She was a natural at acting, I'll tell you that. I was still somewhat shy, but she could pretty much be any given character, and even though she was 14, you'd believe it. She always talked about how she had a photographic memory, and that's how she was able to memorize lines so easily. And she did. It was insane. I've read that she said she had no prior acting experience, but this isn't true. I'm not sure if she said this for part of her look, or maybe she considered what we did informal, but we definitely took acting classes for our entire 8th grade year. I will say with her that what you see is what you get. She was always very quirky, kind of weird, which was funny because she was so preppy presenting, but really wasn't like that. She was very loud, made her presence known, and it's been bizarre seeing her in interviews because she acts the exact same. I remember after she moved to New York City to pursue modeling between 8th and 9th grade. It worked because soon after she was in a commercial for Burger King and a couple of MTV's My Sweet 16 commercials as well. She was doing online classes for our high school, Ballard High School, and came to visit one time in 9th grade and another time in 10th grade. I squealed when I saw her. I genuinely missed her. I had no idea she was about to become one of the most famous actresses of our generation. I always hear she comes to town for holidays, but at this point I have no idea how to contact her. She had a private Facebook for a while. Assuming it really was her, For a time, I had a few fake accounts from her request to be my Facebook friend, along with a lot of people we went to school with. The last time we spoke was for my 21st birthday, and I'm 29 now, but I'd love to catch up with her. I can't help but wonder if she remembers me. I still have her yearbook photo that she signed hanging up in my room, our yearbooks, and a couple of photos from a disposable camera. I knew Tom Holland at the time he did the Tsunami movie. We weren't really friends, but he was funny and friendly. I had a teacher who taught Drake. Apparently he was a nice kid, but then turned into a D-bag when he started getting famous. When my dad was in the army, he and some other army members were invited to the filming set of Saving Private Ryan. They were asked to show the actors how to hold guns and how to act like real soldiers. He told me that he had met Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks during his time there. He said that both of them seemed like nice people, but that Tom Hanks in particular was incredibly down-to-earth, genuine, and had a great sense of humor. I know this is after he became famous, but it's nice to know fame didn't turn him into something negative. I played drums with Mike Portnoy in high school band, and I'm still friends with his sister, and he's still a cool guy. My brother knows the guy that Squidward was based off. Turns out that made him even more bitter because he was being made fun of. My mum knew Seal as far back as when he was still trying to be an architect, and she says he was always really nice. They didn't stay in touch, she moved away and they were never close. But she said he went out of his way to foster genuine connections to people before and after his music started to gain traction. He always had star quality. Everyone from the most important person in the room to the janitor walking through would be drawn to him, and he'd engage with everyone in a way that would really stick. She always mentions he was just a really sincere, deeply felt person. My biology teacher was friends with Rainn Wilson, or Dwight from The Office. They used to grab coffee often around the time The Office started. From how she described him, Rainn seems like a pretty down-to-earth guy. You know, this will probably get lost in the sea of comments, but my ex-boyfriend's mum ran a pizza shop that Pink worked at as a 16-year-old. I guess she would always be singing randomly at work. She'd use spoons, utensils, and anything she could find to use as a fake microphone. But she was a crappy worker and would straight up walk out of her shifts whenever she wanted without telling anyone and somehow not get fired for it. She didn't give an F even back then.
Who was the most out-of-touch nutcase you've ever had to deal with? So I was at a bar, and some guy was giving an impromptu lecture on why millennials are so broke, and he blamed it on all of us being lazy students who don't want to work or go to school. When asked what he did, he said he was a property owner and owned a few apartment buildings. Then one of his friends chimes in with the fact he doesn't own any properties, he manages them for his uncle who pays him to do nothing all day. My friend stole my credit card information and bought loads of expensive stuff. I asked her if it was her before reporting it, knowing that A, she was going through a tough time and I wanted to give her a chance to make it right, and B, that I could be in trouble for conspiracy to fraud if I reported it, and they believed I'd got stuff delivered to my friend to claim fraud for the money back. She said, no, it wasn't her. I thought someone else had done it, so I reported it. When she got arrested, she said she didn't think that they'd take the fraud thing so far. She thought you could just call up banks to get the money back, and they wouldn't even investigate. Wow, they really take this identity theft thing really seriously. Who knew? I'm fairly convinced that my current shift supervisor thinks anyone who works an overtime shift is doing it out of loyalty to the company and not because of the overtime pay rate. I have an aunt who's never really worked a day in her life because her husband created his own business early on in life. They live in a McMansion, and I was over once and we got to talking about fitness, and she told me, "Oh yeah, we send Pamela to this special training gym. It's only $200 a week. You should try it." The fact that to her it was only $200 really kills me. I made $9.95 an hour at the time. She's nice enough, but not in touch with reality at all. "It's a banana, Michael. What could it possibly cost? $12? I knew a girl who cheated on her boyfriend, and when he found out, he broke up with her. She said, "You can't break up with me. It has to be mutual." Had a friend who insisted she was in a relationship with a C-list celebrity who she met once during a comic convention. All of the celebrity's Instagram and Twitter posts were apparently for her, and everything had a meaning behind it. When the celebrity got married, she said that it was just for the media so she and the celebrity could live a quiet life. And then, when he didn't do anything for her birthday, she had a breakdown. She went to therapy not long after. Oh boy, I was 100% certain they were just a very dedicated liar until that last bit. It's good that she realized she needed help. Alright, it's my time to shine. So I grew up with a lot of restrictions, had no idea that options existed. For example, I was only allowed 2 options of shoes, but the catch was that I needed to make the right choice. I didn't know that I could choose to make friends of my own. I'd just be told that this is your new friend, so go play with them. Sadly, my dad kept me in a small box, and he was the only one allowed to control what would go into that box or come out. So when I was 10, CPS was involved and I was taken into foster care. And that is when my world exploded. I didn't know how truly bad it was until they took me to a shoe store and told me to pick out ones I liked. I swear for the life of me I had no clue what to do. I stood there for what felt like hours until they noticed and asked what my favorite color was. I said green because that's what my father told me I liked. But I guess I was too overwhelmed and I just remember saying yes to everything and I ended up with ugly brown and pink sneakers. What children learn to do at their normal age is what I'm figuring out in my 20s. So reality was a hard thing to live because the whole time I was in my restricted world. My cousin was spoiled and sheltered her entire childhood through college. Then her parents stupidly cut the leash without any preparation and just released her into society. She quickly got in trouble for bouncing checks all over town. My mum picked her up and asked what the heck she was writing bad checks everywhere for. Turns out, she was under the impression that as long as you had checks in your checkbook, you had money in your account. She didn't understand that you deposit in a number and then can spend or withdraw up to that amount. Please, teach your kids basic finance. And this was like 1996, before it turns into a "who even writes a check anymore" discussion. Settle down, guys. I had a neighbor once that was convinced I was flirting with him and wanted to be with him. He got all of this from the one-word verbal exchange we'd have while getting our mail, which was basically saying, "Hi." Keep in mind that at the time I was 16, in high school, and he was probably well into his 20s. He proceeded to creep on and stalk me. Examples included messaging me on Facebook, declaring his love for me, and feeling wronged because I was playing hard to get. He'd knock at our house door when he knew my parents weren't home and try to lure me out, saying that, "I just want to talk to you." He searched me up on all of my social media accounts and tried to contact me on all of them. He used my last name from our mailbox and searched for me. It didn't help that we lived in the same building. I got so scared that I could no longer go outside for a run like I usually did. I filed a police report and his family asked mine to please forgive their son. This completely freaked me out and my family decided to move. My old boss at the time was a girl of 26 who got $4 million from her mum a year to play with. Her mum is very wealthy in China. Her daughter is here trying to be a CEO of a company for fun. I accidentally got a job at that, well, we'll charitably call it a company. One day she told us we were all going to go on a group outing for bonding. She took us to an outlet mall 4 hours away, told the rest of us 7 people that she was going to go shop and she'd see us later. That was code for, "Don't follow me, frickers." Every 2 hours, she'd let us know she was going to go unload her bags in a giant van that they rented, and group texted us telling us we can meet her there to unload as well. We all got paid under $50K. We had nothing to unload. By lunch, she had proceeded to fill up the van with her crap. She then asks me where all of my new stuff is, and I said, "I'm budgeting right now." She goes, "Take out a credit card and go shop. That's the American way." Seriously. Okay. By 9 p.m., her bags were taking up people's seats and they had to sit with her stuff in their laps. She spent $30 grand. The rest of us spent about $70 apiece. We were tired and bored and cold. To this day, I still think she believes she did something nice for us and doesn't understand how polarizing and not at all team bonding that was. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of team bonding involved, just not with her. Well, yes, you're actually right about that. This was from a regional manager of Starbucks after they removed merit-based raises that could go up to a 5% increase to a flat 2% increase. When she asked if people liked the new raise system, I said, actually, no. We feel unmotivated with no reason to perform any better than just okay. The regional manager then replied, "Well, your staff need to realize that working isn't about money." One bully of a boss asked the 3 people who suffered most from his behavior if they'd want to move to a new employer with him as a team. How about no way in hell? Rick Snyder, former governor of Michigan. When the Detroit area was wrecked by massive flooding and most houses with basements flooded a few feet deep and people lost tons of their stuff and thousands of cars were written off because of the flooding of the roads, Rick let us all know that he understood what it was like. because one of his multiple vacation properties had a leaky roof one time and some of his carpet got wet. A streamer that I watched a couple of times before his behavior drove me to stop. It was a shame because when he was actually gaming, I liked the content, but his attitude drove you up the wall, and by attitude I mean raging. Back when I used to watch him, the rest of the events I'm about to unfold hadn't happened yet. But the out of touch with reality part was, he talked about his girlfriend on stream a few times, nothing wrong with that, except his, quote, girlfriend was a female streamer who lived in Europe. He was from the States and he had never actually met her in his life. She got wind of this through shared viewers and debunked the story on her stream, saying she had never even interacted with him. This caused him to go nuts and start stalking the girl wherever he could, causing her to eventually stop streaming, delete all her social media, and so on and so forth. After his Twitch account was banned for this, he eventually managed to convince Twitch to unban him, and then did the same thing to a different girl. Now that he's been permanently banned from Twitch as a result of this, again, he keeps raging about it on Twitter. Just to clarify, I don't follow this guy anymore, but someone posts about him on the game subreddits every now and then, which is why I know the story. Some people are just bananas. Haha, well, maybe you could have watched my stream back when I did that. I was the opposite. A minimum of toxic behavior as well as being terrible at video games and not able to be entertaining on the fly and focus on the game at the same time. It would have been a refreshing change of scenery before you died of boredom, I'm sure. Working in a pharmacy.
Hello, could I get the yellow ones, please?
Sorry, could I get your first name?
Oh, it doesn't matter. I just need the yellow round ones.
Do you have a prescription?
No, I always get them here. Little yellow round ones.
It went on like this for literally 20-something minutes. And here's what I found out in that time. By little round ones, he meant red or orange circular Xarelto tablets. He had been on a lower dose a couple of years ago, and he hadn't filled the yellow ones in over 18 months. There was one dispense tech who knew his name and knew his doctor. By sheer coincidence, she had greeted him every time he came in for the last 2 or 3 years. He essentially had no idea how a pharmacy worked. He'd only ever been to this one, only ever picked up one medication, and only through one tech who knew the doctor sent his scripts through every few months. It was surreal explaining reality to somebody who by pure fortune had just never experienced it. My stepfather's grandpa suffered from psychosis in a strange way. He wasn't able to distinguish mirror reflections from real life. He'd often be talking to the mirrors, his reflection, for hours. Later on, he wasn't allowed to have any mirrors because he'd believe that man was there to kill him, and would often turn violent. Turn violent as in he'd start punching and clawing against the mirrors. I knew someone who unironically tried to convince me that not only are Pokemon demonic, but they exist in real life and there are reported cases of them attacking and harming people. I loved Pokemon as a kid. I had all of the games and probably about $500 worth of cards. My mum suddenly said it was demonic and in her own words, "We have to burn them as a sacrifice to God." I'm still angry to this day. Also, she turned anti-vax around that time too. The worst part is I believed her because I was around 9.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
My sister-in-law. Kicked out by her boyfriend, she came to stay with us for a few days. We suggested looking for a flat or cheap house to rent near us. She won't live in the scummy part of town near us. She'd like a 3-bed house with a garden in the best part of town. She has no savings and isn't sure if she has a job. She was a part-time cashier in a supermarket and stopped going to work when COVID came. You should note that she wasn't furloughed, the supermarket was still open, she just wasn't going in. When I suggested maybe she couldn't afford $500K on a family home on her salary, she suggested she'd just get a council house, disregarding the huge waiting list and the fact that most council properties are in the ghetto parts of town. This is just the crust of a deep layer of unhinged fantasy world that she lives in. My sister grew up with everything handed to her and literally cried when her first car wasn't the color she wanted. Married rich, can't fathom why I can't just take off from work whenever it suits me, and says stuff like, "I wouldn't ask my boss for a week off, I'd tell him I'm taking the week off." A woman who I knew a few years ago. She had a job. She was convinced she was supposed to be a movie star. She never did any acting though. She told me about the married man that she'd slept with, saying, "He loves me, but he can't leave his wife. She actually did stop doing the deed with him, but they still hung out. Oof. I had a friend who started having an affair with a married man several years ago. It's a special kind of delusional. You have to convince them that 1. Their dream man is actually a butthole, he's breaking his wedding vows and tearing apart his family for riding you. 2. He's not going to leave his family for you. If he wanted to leave his wife, he would have done it already. And if he does, he'll also leave you for someone younger, hotter, and more fun in a few years. And 3, you're not in a relationship. Sneaking off to hotels, giving him down-under kisses in his car, and having you text his burner phone that he keeps in the trunk of his car is just not a relationship. My boss's wife, 28. She grew up in a wealthy family and married to a man who was third generation owning the company he was in, and they were like a regional power where they were. She was talking to a staff that in general made like $36K a year, making fun of a staffer who was on his honeymoon. Tennessee? Ha! Tennessee? She looked around the room for everyone to join in. My God, how did she agree to that? We did Hawaii, and that was the least I told mine was acceptable. I went to a private international school in London as a teenager. Most kids there had parents working good jobs, but in between them were some filthy rich kids, with parents in the oil industry or something similar. In 8th grade, we were talking about our Easter break, and my friend from Belgium was talking about how his family had decided last minute to go over there for the break, but had then decided to drive there because there were no flights available. Then this Russian billionaire classmate of mine asked him, "Why don't you take private jets?" She was so clueless when we started laughing. My brother, on his own income, and let's just take his rich fiancé out of the equation, can't afford to even live where he currently rents because he's on minimum wage. I work my butt off to buy my house on my own after working multiple jobs and saving up. He called my new area a crap hole in front of my entire family, when in reality, if he was dumped by his fiancée, he wouldn't even be able to afford a bedsit. Biggest snob ever. My dad gave him a super expensive, award-winning bottle of wine and he texted him saying it tasted fricking awful. My brother is in tons of debt, but because his fiancé's family is wealthy, he's acting like he's part of the elite and looks down on where I live, which is a lovely, affordable working-class town, by the way. Okay, don't worry folks, this is a positive one. A bunch of medical trainees were learning how to perform a pelvic exam on a female patient. The lectures emphasize very clinical language and how to perform an exam in the most professional and non-traumatic way possible. A male student complained that he didn't understand why we were being so picky. I realized that no one had explicitly said, "Many people have been the victim of the unspeakable act, so we don't want to re-traumatize them." So I said that, and we discussed how even if he doesn't mean to, he can scare or hurt an already traumatized person, and how he can never tell, and 30% or more of women have a history of something like this. He had never known this, and once I got through to him, I could tell it really shook him. Months later, prostate exam lectures were much less professional and much more butts. So he came to me and asked me why they were different. Couldn't men be the victim of stuff like this as well? It prompted some complaints and some change in policy. Good man. Honestly, we love a story of growth here on the channel. Look at this guy, going from being completely out of touch with the trials some of his fellow humans go through in their lives, to actively advocating for others of a similar nature once he's had the truth shown to him. It gives you hope. Next up, a story about someone who I'm absolutely sure was Lucille Bluth from Arrested Development. My cousin's wife got very sick while we were at a wedding in Mexico because she drank no water, only alcohol. She said, "There were ice chips in my drink, so I thought that was enough." Anyway, she complained because at the hospital, some of the staff didn't speak English. "You're in a Spanish-speaking country, woman." I worked on shifts with a guy for years who thought every single person was just out to get him. I've never met anyone who had such a warped sense of reality. He would joke on with someone, then go away for the weekend and stew on one particular thing that someone had said, and then come in on Monday absolutely raging over taking something the completely wrong way. I've seen him attack 2 people and heard about a third. The thing is, he's so dopey that everyone thinks he's harmless, and that's just the way he is. A guy I trained as an apprentice has just started on shifts with him and doesn't take anyone being a jerk well at all. I think they'll do well together. My father. He is a habitual liar. I somehow think he believes his own lies. Over the past couple of years, I've noticed he doesn't actually have anything new to say. He sort of just regurgitates sentences in slightly different ways. It's caused his business to fail. He lied to everyone that was employed there, saying he had to liquidate the company. going so far as to tell people he met with lawyers and the process has been started. I did some digging and found out there were no lawyers or liquidation. He just tried to duck the system. I have no contact with him anymore, but my brother says he's still trying to use the same tactics. I just feel he believes everything he says, sort of like living in his own head. Very sad that he damaged lives in the process. My girlfriend was traveling in China when she was 18 years old and was once randomly approached by a man claiming to be a scientist performing a medical study on feet. He'd need to measure the exact dimensions of her feet. For this, she obviously had to take off her shoes and socks, and he would need to take some pictures of her feet as well. Years later, when she tells the story to me and some friends in a bar, at first we start laughing but then realize she isn't joking, and still doesn't realize what had happened there. We actually had to spell it out for her. I'm sure she made that guy very happy for quite a while. I'm a mental health therapist who works with severe mental health diagnoses such as schizophrenia and stuff like that. So I've met a lot of people who aren't in touch with reality, but I'm assuming the question is more about people who appear to have their wits about them and just are very unaware about the realities of life. So I have a sad one. My female cousin who was getting married was very shy, very nice, but not a popular kid. She also didn't attend family events or really build relationships with anyone. She was marrying a gentleman very similar to her, but with a wiener. However, her family were pretty well off, and their older son just had a huge expensive wedding with about 200 guests. Even though she asked for a small wedding, her family invited all of these family members and friends, and even though they didn't get any RSVPs back, they still went all out on venue and food and entertainment. Apparently, it was the same with the groom's family. He wanted a small wedding and didn't have much of a social group or family. So when the big day came, there were only about 10 to 15 guests in a venue set up to entertain and feed over 150 people with an open bar. The bride and groom didn't drink. Bride and groom were both extremely embarrassed, and it ruined the whole day for them given how awkward and quiet it was. My immediate family wasn't invited to the event. My family sucks, but that's a different story. But I always just felt really bad for her. Neither the bride nor the groom were bad people, but they were just reserved and private, and they had their very special day ruined by oblivious parents. Side note, a few years later, after building successful careers and coming out of their social shells, they had a pretty wonderful small renewal of vows in a gorgeous location with select friends and family. Parents of a 35-year-old woman who was hospitalized after suffering severe anoxic brain damage 20 years ago. She had been in the same ward since, barely conscious. They refused to get her transferred to a more suitable facility for 20 years, saying there's no reason to do so. Those facilities are for lost causes, and their daughter is going to make a full recovery, finish school, get married, and be totally fine. Working in hospitals got me quite a collection of these stories, but this one I thought was one of the saddest ones. My sister-in-law believes she's a strong, independent businesswoman who owns 3 major businesses. She does 3 multi-level marketing gigs. The irritating thing is that I actually do have a brick-and-mortar business that I've been running for 5 years now, and she's always giving me, quote, business advice and pushing me to join her for these amazing opportunities. It's so stereotypically obnoxious. Oh my god, hun, I totally understand the grind. Yeah, I bet you do. All said while wearing brightly horrendous outfits, caked on makeup, and smelling like decaying frankincense. I had a dorm mate who was kicked out of the dorm. He would leave number 2 all over the common bathroom and then just leave it. He didn't understand why everyone else was so upset. This happened several times until he was removed. Unbelievable. I had this friend who insisted that she wasn't rich and that it's normal to go get a boat worth like 10k, among other presents, for your 17th birthday. What brand are you never giving your money to again, and why? I run the front desk at a hotel, and Expedia are an absolute nightmare. They also just straight up lie to the guests and to the hotels constantly. Truly one of the most shady companies I've ever dealt with. They purposely try and deceive people who don't know any better into thinking that they're dealing with the hotel directly. They create ads in such a way that when people Google the hotel's phone number, a number to Expedia comes up, and if the customer asks if they're speaking directly with the hotel front desk, they will just say yes. There have been countless times where guests have called to cancel their reservation that was booked through Expedia. I inform them that they'll have to contact Expedia directly since they prepaid through them, but that it will be no issue because the hotel doesn't charge a penalty fee for cancellation. An Expedia representative will call the hotel with the guest on hold and ask about getting it cancelled. I tell them it's no problem. Then they ask if we'll be charging that penalty fee, and I tell them no. So all is right and good, right? Nope. I then get a call back from the guest who's upset, saying that the Expedia representative told them that they couldn't be refunded because of the fee charged by the hotel's cancellation policy, taking the guest's money, blaming it on the hotel, and keeping all of the profit. This has happened countless times. I once had a guest, while out at the front desk, call about cancelling 3 days out of a multiple-day reservation, as she had to leave earlier than expected. They pulled the same bullcrap with her, not knowing that she was at the front desk. After me telling the representative that the cancellation is fine and we won't be charging any penalties, they get back on the phone with her and blatantly lie. I asked her to hand the phone to me, and that was quite a surprise for the representative, who said that, there must have been a misunderstanding. We bought a flea medicine from Hart's to use on our cat, and she became lethargic and didn't eat anything. We took her to the vet, and they told us that they'd been trying to get that medicine off the shelves because of how it affects the animals. I was in a theater watching Despicable Me when my cat finally passed away. It sucked knowing that my cat was dead because some money-hungry brand didn't care about the safety of the animals it was giving its products to. Pyrethrins are toxic to cats. I nearly killed my cat with Hart's ear mite solution 15 years ago, and it's still on the market. Why Hart's hasn't been sued out of existence, I will never understand. If I see something is being shipped by OnTrack, I'll cancel. The 3 times they were the delivery company from Amazon, they lost one package completely and tried to say it wasn't their fault. The second package was also deemed lost, but then showed up on my doorstep something like 6 weeks later. The third time it sat on shipping label created for a week, and I just contacted Amazon and cancelled the package. You don't find a lot of positive reviews out there, and any positive ones you do find seem like they were written by the company via a fake account. It looks like they were bought out shortly after this comment was made, and then the company who made the purchase changed the name of the combined businesses back to OnTrack after consuming them. Why you'd want to be associated with this level of service is a mystery to me. Maybe they've got less crappy since then, I don't know. I used to be a health inspector. In my first year, a lot of my old favorite restaurants were ruined for me, but none so bad as the discount sushi place my college bestie and I used to frequent. They had roaches bad. In my time at the health department, I never saw them worse than in that kitchen. We got calls about the roaches at least twice a month, and every time we went, they were back with a vengeance. They were closed for them multiple times, but just never kept up with the pest control and cleaning necessary to get rid of them. They were also dyeing tilapia red and selling it as snapper on their menu. This is pretty common around here, but it's super illegal because it's literal false advertising. Fun fact, some people are allergic to tilapia specifically. Not sure I want to be around when that restaurant owner finds that out. They had hundreds of cardboard boxes stacked outside their back door, plus a bunch of old equipment they aren't using. This added to the roach problem, and any day it could turn into a rodent problem. One time I drove by and they had animal cages back there as well. I don't want to know the story behind that. Add to that, I'm pretty sure the employees were all indentured servants or victims of human trafficking. They all show up in the same beat-up white van every day and work a 12-plus hour shift. The owner is very unkind to them and they don't respect him. He says he can trust them to do their jobs, but was sketchy when we said to fire them and hire employees who'll do their jobs properly. We never had proof, but it was always upsetting and struck me as off. He tried to bribe me and my coworkers multiple times too. I'm not a health inspector anymore, but he still tries to give me free food or money when he sees me. He opened a new restaurant and I didn't know it was his. So my friend and I went to go check it out. I was told that appetizers were free for me only. Then I saw him in the back. We had to leave. Never again. It's too sketchy and too likely to get me sick. Comcast. A door-to-door salesman straight up lied to my dad, saying they had a 4 DVR setup that would cost less than what we were paying at AT&T. When the installation guy got there, he said that no, they didn't have a 4 DVR setup. He was told to give us the standard 2 DVR setup, which was absolutely not something that would work in a house with 6 people with wildly different tastes and TV shows. So my dad tells him, never mind, we're sticking with AT&T then. But because the Comcast guy had already installed our new cable box, he couldn't take it back with him. So we had to mail it back to Comcast ourselves. The kicker is that 5 years later, Comcast tried to bill my parents for the cable box, saying we never sent it back. My parents insisted they did, and Comcast wanted the UPS receipt, which obviously we no longer had because it was 5 years ago, and we hadn't heard anything from them before this. So my parents refused to pay. Comcast sent a collections company after us, and when my parents explained the situation to the collection company, they were like, "Those motherfrickers. We'll take care of this." That was, thankfully, the end of it. Lyft. They recently charged me a damage fee for the damages I couldn't have plausibly caused. I sent statements explaining how it couldn't have been me. They sent back a standardized statement and didn't give me any additional information. There's no phone line to talk to a representative. I sent them multiple follow-up emails which they never responded to. Now I have to write a statement for my credit card company to dispute the charge. Yeah, I had one where the driver tried handing me free water, the bottle fell out of his hand and some water spilled on me and the seat. 2 weeks later, I got a charge of $129 for damage. Let me tell you, I went absolutely crazy. I told them I'll see them in court and they changed their tune. I never had to pay them. I hate them. Warning, disgusting story ahead. I went to Dickie's Barbecue Pit. Their food isn't amazing, but I was craving southern food and my suburban town in California doesn't have many options. So me and my girlfriend buy some sandwiches and have them for dinner. They're cold and they taste like salty sweat. The next day, I have uncontrollable stinky liquid coming out of both ends of my body multiple times an hour. If I was alone, I would have gone to the emergency room, but my dad's a nurse and was home. I chucked up something like 20 times in the whole day and kept dry heaving afterwards. The diarrhea came so fast and uncontrolled that it ruined multiple pairs of undies and a rug that was by the toilet. Why my dad has rugs in the bathroom, I don't know, but I ruined it when I bent over the toilet. It took only a day for me to feel better, and I was already eating heavy foods again, but lo and behold, guess who comes over to see me well again and also craps herself in my bathroom? My girlfriend, the only other person who ate at Dickie's. So I spent the rest of the day, after having just pooped and spewed myself to death, helping my girlfriend while she was experiencing the same. I think we're closer to each other after that experience. In short, ate at Dickie's Barbecue Pit, pooped and blew chunks, ruining clothes and a rug. My girlfriend came over and did the exact same thing as me. Wayfair. Purchased a $1,000 sectional couch that was delivered with damaged upholstery. They refused to let me return it and instead offered me 10% off my next purchase. I'm never using that discount code. They refuse to let you return it? Screw that. Dispute the charge. Not enough people know that you can dispute charges through your bank. Honestly, the narrator had basically forgotten that this was an option as well. Well, now we've been informed, folks. Don't let these companies push you around. There were several more testimonials of how Wayfair had refused refunds and then apparently backed right down as soon as the banks got involved. I bought an engine from AutoZone for a vehicle I owned. They had a vendor build the engine, and it was supposed to ship to my house. I waited 3 weeks for it to arrive, but it never did. I contacted their store. I was told that it hadn't shipped yet and was coming via FedEx Freight. I kept up with the tracking number, but couldn't get anywhere with it. I kept calling back every couple of days to see what was going on, and nobody could figure it out. I finally managed to find out that it had shipped via another company, RL Freight, and had been delivered to somewhere else. It was like pulling teeth to get a refund on an engine I never received. It took another 2 weeks to get the refund. I won't buy a soda from AutoZone now. Yeah, I got 3 bad starters in a row from them. I thought I was losing my frickin' mind. The 4th came from a dealership and it's still in the truck 4 years later. JDM Racing Motors gave me a damaged motor and claimed a compression test was the only way to test the engine and said that it passed. Barely held on in one cylinder. To make matters worse, if you put coolant in where it ought to go, it would come out of the oil pan. Made a few calls and had email exchanges with their mechanics, and was informed the coolant and oil touch regularly and that's how it cools the oil. It's just wrong on so many levels. Never got my money back either, so I ended up using the good parts from the exterior to rebuild my old engine. 1-800-Flowers. Screw them so hard. They waited several days after I placed an order for Mother's Day flowers to tell me that they wouldn't be able to fulfill the order. They waited until the day before, putting me in a bad position. Now, I Google my mom's zip, add flowers, and have a few choices. I call the local shops directly, and 1-800-Flowers is cut out of the process. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Florist here, 100% do not use places like 1-800-Flowers or ProFlowers. You will never get what you ordered and they destroy local floral businesses by cheating them on money and business. Basically, what happens is they advertise and take orders for flower arrangements, and then send those orders to local florists through Teleflora or FTD, while keeping a majority of the price. For example, they'll charge you $50 for a floral arrangement and will show you a picture of an arrangement that in reality costs about $70. Then they send it to a local florist and give the florist about $30 to make that exact same arrangement and tell them to just substitute as necessary. So the florist has two options. Either make the arrangement as pictured and take $20 to $40 loss, or make the arrangement for the value given to them by the site and risk an upset customer. Either way, us local florists lose and look bad. Now, florists can reject the orders, which is probably what happened to your order because they weren't giving the florists enough and they didn't want to take the hit on Mother's Day. But if they reject it, they lose money and business, which isn't always feasible for small floral shops that need the money. The cherry on top is that if something is wrong, we have to make it right and give them what they want and hope 1-800-Flowers pays us back for it. It's incredibly crappy for customers and florists alike, and it should be illegal. Frontier Internet. They're one of the crappiest ISPs I've ever had. I will never go back, no matter how cheap it is. I have Frontier. I stopped paying them like 3 years ago, and they continue to give me service. They are so disorganized that they have no idea. I almost switched from Comcast to Frontier just for the cable only. My install day came, and I was given a 4-hour window, and nobody showed up. I waited around 2 hours after the window, and then finally called, and they said, "Oh, the installer got busy and we need to reschedule. We can do it 2 weeks from now." I told them to cancel my installation because it didn't really seem like they wanted my business. You know, a company's got to be a special kind of freaking incompetent to make Comcast the preferable option. Macy's. I got a credit card through them to buy a suit. My parents offered to pay the card off as a birthday present. Cue months of them calling me 5+ times a day asking where the payment that had already been made was, harassing me to make more and larger payments. When it was finally paid off, they then tacked on a completed fee charge and never sent a bill, so the whole damn thing started all over. I was genuinely about to file a lawsuit over harassment or something. It was unbelievable, because I'd tell one person the payment was made and then get 4 more calls the same day asking the same thing. Then rinse and repeat tomorrow. Spirit Airlines. Never again. Frick them. A flight from Vegas got cancelled. This was one of many incidents I've had to deal with them. This one just broke me because I was flying from Vegas. I can only handle Vegas for 2 nights. After that, I want the F out of there. Having to stay there another night wasn't something I wanted to do. It wasn't weather-related, as they made a point of telling me. No other flights into Detroit that day were cancelled. I checked. I even told that to the customer service agent, and he shrugged it off. They don't even bother trying to put you on another flight. Not only that, you have to pay extra for the next flight available. I told them they can go F themselves and I want a refund. The customer service person told me he can refund me Spirit credit, and that's when I lost it. After enough complaining, he gave me my money back on my credit card and I bought a flight on Delta. LuLaRoe. I only bought stuff to help out a friend who was trying to make ends meet. Luckily, she quit after about a year. I bought 3 pairs of leggings over the course of the year, and none of them made it the year without holes. $25 each. Never again. My friend spent almost $20,000 to start up for LuLaRoe. She ended up not selling very much, and they don't let you return the unused product for full price, only half price. I'm glad she's not selling it anymore because I have the same complaint about the quality of the clothes. Absolute garbage pyramid scheme. Folks, read the terms and conditions. I can't believe how many people fall for these damn things still. Like, I think these things were a joke in the 90s and noughties, and that hasn't changed. It's just a damn shame that despite the very public knowledge about what an MLM is, people have continued falling for them. AT&T. I was told that cancelling my cable and internet services with them would cost me $50 to not return the modem and cable box. I didn't care, as I would have had to mail them in, and I didn't want to mess with the hassle, so I didn't. 6 months later, I find a $487 charge on my MasterCard, and it was from AT&T. It was $150 per piece of equipment and a $37 service charge, charging me money for their hassle of having to charge me money. I asked if I returned the equipment, would they rescind the charges, and they said yes. I returned the equipment, and they refused to take off the charge. I confirmed with them that they'd received the equipment, and they said yes they did, but wouldn't rescind the charges after all. I fought it up their chain of command as much as possible and even tried to fight it through MasterCard, but they couldn't do anything about it either. In short, AT&T screwed me out of $487 and lied to me, so F them. Neiman Marcus. I went there to buy a Prada bag for my mother. She had a knockoff and she loved it, so I figured she'd appreciate the real thing. I wear t-shirts to work, but this day it was at least a fancy one. But it didn't matter to the sales lady who told me my bag was very expensive and rolled her eyes and walked away. So I went next door to the actual Prada store and bought one there.
I don't need to be judged by an angry middle-aged woman working retail, thank you very much. Comcast. F Comcast. They failed to turn off my service when I changed addresses, billed me for 2 more months, sent me to collections, and then hounded me for 3 years. I could sue, but it's not worth the stress. Additional info, I called them about this more than a dozen times and every time escalated the situation. They have dozens of tapes of us, albeit in a few of them I'm absolutely freaking out about the whole thing on the phone. My best experience was when I called their corporate office directly, but even then it was a crap show and like a week before anything happened, and I was still being hounded by collection companies somehow. Never again. Wayfair. They delivered a wooden table that had a huge split on the side and was broken where you put the leaf in to extend the table. Got 4 redeliveries and every single time it was the exact same table with the exact same damage. Eventually I got a full refund, but did they seriously think that would work? It makes 0 sense to me. As a bonus, I ordered a bedroom set around the same time and paid for delivery and assembly. The, quote, assemblers were 2/3 through the assembly and told me they couldn't finish because they couldn't understand the instructions. So I had them take all the stuff back and also got a refund. TurboTax. I did my return, got a notice that my e-file needed to be corrected, logged back in to fix it, and my return just wasn't there anymore. 6 hours on the phone with 3 tiers of tech support, each one trying exactly the same thing. Finally, they were just trying random stuff, so I tried random stuff in parallel and managed to get my return with the invoice number from paying for the service without logging in. I tried to get them to understand that this was a very bad thing that they should report to someone, and they told me they had no access to anyone technical and no way to submit bugs. This was from the company that lobbied to make it illegal for the government to offer tax filing service. I had some fairly expensive furniture delivered from Art Van before and noticed a pretty big scuff where the laminate was chipped off the side of a computer hutch. This was in the mid-90s. Anyway, they said that they'd get another from the truck, which I found really implausible, and sure enough, they were gone for 10 minutes before coming back with the exact same hutch, except they'd colored in the chipped area with a brown marker. I made some interesting phone calls after that one. A bar I went to on my 25th birthday. I got there first and I opened a tab to get my first couple of drinks before my friends showed up and started buying for me. At the end of the night, I went to get my bill, which should have been under $20. Instead, I got a single piece of paper with the total of $85. It didn't come with an itemized slip, so that was unusual. All the times I'd gone to the bar before, I got itemized receipts. All of my friends that night got itemized receipts when they closed out. I spent 20 minutes on my birthday at the bar calling out the bartender's name, asking for an itemized receipt, while he pretended he couldn't hear or see me. I went home and reached out to management and explained the story to them, including how long I'd tried to get his attention. The manager's reply was, "If you thought there was an issue with your receipt, you should have asked the bartender to explain it to you." Never again. In case anyone cares, it's Penn Social in DC. Since this seems to be coming up a lot, this is America, so not chip and pin. They won't serve you unless they first swipe your credit card. I couldn't simply leave without paying. It was going to be charged to me no matter what. My experience with disputing charges is that it's not super convenient, so I was really hoping to be able to deal with this at the bar without having to do that. I took my Beta Woods truck to a local tire shop for an alignment. They told me they couldn't align it because I had a sticky U-joint and then charged me for hours of labor because they, quote, had to take the tie rods off. I argued that because A, U-joints don't impact alignment, and B, there was about an inch of grime on the castle nuts, there's no way the tie rods came off. They bought out a manager who just made crap up about how alignments work. I'm a mechanical engineer. I think they thought they could get away with it because I'm a woman. Nope, I filed a complaint with the state and they were fined for lying about service costs. I guess we add mechanics to the list of, when you find a good one, hang on to them for dear life, trades, along with contractor, babysitter, escort, and hitman. Good to know. Chili's. I don't know how this even happens, but I was served fried chicken that was cold and literally had ice on it. To anyone reading this later on, I want you to know that Chili's PR staff has since contacted me trying to smooth things over. Yeah, right. Chili's served me frozen food and I'd rather trash them forever than be sweet-talked with a gift card. Panera. They raised prices and shrank their portions a while ago. It's not worth it anymore.
Fricking AT&T, it's one thing after another with these buttholes. They've been taking $60 a month from my checking account for the last 7 months for a prepaid phone that I don't have. They can't tell me why or take me off autodraft because I don't have a phone number to look up the phone that I don't own. Just spent almost an hour at the bank trying to dispute this crap. It's just the most recent in a long line of crappery caused by AT&T. They're absolute twits.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.